Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls Podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, theories, and more.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's final ACOTAR episode, where we are covering the end of the book, chapters 42 through 46 of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. But before we dive into this episode, please listen closely to our content warning. While we're focusing our discussion on chapters 42 through 46, and of course, book one, because we're at the end of it, we are going to bring in themes, foreshadowing, lore, and other insights across the series. So yes, all of our episodes, especially this one, include spoilers for the entire ACOTAR series. These ACOTAR deep dives do not, however, have spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas's series, except at the end of some episodes where we include our Maasverse Madness segment, but we don't have one of those today. We have too much else to talk about.
So with all of that said, if you don't know why the High Lord of the Night Court's eyes go wide and immediately causes me to burst into tears, then please go finish the series. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we of Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, this podcast is rated R.
While we get a sex scene in this episode, believe it or not, that is definitely not the most adult thing we will be discussing today. But in all seriousness, though, this particular episode discusses triggering themes like murder and sexual assault. So please be mindful and listen to your comfort level.
Separately, we are so excited to announce that we are going to be the podcast partner for Rain and Revelry's Dragon Gauntlet in Boyne City, Michigan on August 16th and 17th of this year.
We'll be kicking off festivities with a live show on Friday the 16th, and then we will be at one of the stations for an epic mountainside scavenger hunt the next day on the 17th. And of course, we cannot wait to dress up in our Reunification Day's finest for the Dragon Bookish themed ball that evening on the 17th.
Get more info and purchase your tickets at the link in our show notes. And hey, if you're a Patreon member, be sure to head to our Patreon portal because we have a special promo code for you. Speaking of, as we head into our final ACOTAR Book 1 episode.
If you love Fantasy Fangirls and you too are feral to get to ACOMAF, if you want more content, more community access to our Boppin' Discord and book club, discounted merch, and more, please check out our Patreon. We have two membership tiers, the Valkyries for $5 a month and the High Fae for $10 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also in the show notes or YouTube caption, depending how you're tuning in right now. And really and truly, thank you so much for supporting Fantasy Fangirls. It means everything to us.
And now, it is time to save Prithian from the horror show that is Amarantha.
As always, Nicole is going to open today's discussion with a summary of what happens in chapters 42 through 46. So gather round, friends. We need an Inner Circle Debrief.
Chapter 42. The night before her final task, Tamlin, rising up from his uselessness, approaches Feyre and directs her to a dark room. And bang, bang. Oh no. Rhys enters, cock-blocking Timitam, and that's rough for these two lovebirds. Tamlin walks out of the room telling Feyre he loves her. Rhys and Feyre are left, and when a disturbance seems to be headed their way, Rhysand begins to kiss Feyre. Amarantha and Tamlin walk in and see Rhysand making out with Feyre's face and covered in her paint. Rhys sends Feyre back to her cell, telling her that he's not interested in her tonight. Feyre follows his orders, trying to make contact with Timitam, but he blatantly ignores her. Woof. Hours later, Rhysand appears in Feyre's cell for some goddamn peace and quiet fare, and he reminds Feyre that if she fails her final task tomorrow, everyone under the mountain is fucked, and Feyre will absolutely die. No pressure, my guy. But if she succeeds, Tamlin, who will be so pissed off at all the shit Rhys has been stirring up, will absolutely kill Amarantha, freeing them all. Feyre realizes that Rhysand might actually be the good guy mastermind all along. Just you wait, Feyre darling. Chapter 43. The day of her final task is here, and there's a weirdness in the crowd. Is that support? Before beginning, Feyre has the opportunity to tell Tamlin how she feels, and despite pouring her heart out to him, he says nothing. The guards bring out three fairies with sacks over their heads and force them to kneel in front of Feyre. Feyre does not like the sight of them kneeling before her. The task is simple. Using ash daggers, stab each of these innocent fairies in the heart. Feyre is horrified and tempted to give up, but she reminds herself that this is the freedom for all of Prithian. She takes the first dagger, apologizes, and stabs the terrified male fairy, killing him. Moving on to fairy number 2, who is reciting a prayer. She kills her too. One more, and the guards remove the hood to reveal Tammy Tam! Dun, dun, dun. Feyre's petrified by her last victim, but Feyre remembers Alice's advice on how there was one more mystery to the curse. What if all those, your heart is stone, Tamlin, wasn't just a saying, but instead something they wanted Feyre to overhear. Brilliant fucking woman that she is, Feyre darling takes a chance and stabs Tamlin in the heart. Chapter 44, Tamlin dies! No, just kidding. Tamlin cries out, but there is a thump that tells Feyre that she guessed right. Amarantha is furious and tells Feyre that she'll free her and Tamlin's court whenever she pleases, since only the riddle part of the bargain was instantaneous freedom. So Amarantha begins to beat Feyre, saying that she'll only stop if she denies her love for Tamlin. Rhysand begins to fight back too and attacks Amarantha, but to no avail because she batters him with her magic as well. But wait, Feyre is ready for brilliant fucking woman round 2. She realizes the answer to the riddle is love. As she says the answer, Amarantha kills her with a crack of her neck. Chapter 45. I'm sorry. The old Feyre can't come to the phone right now. Why? Oh, because she's dead. Feyre, seeing through Rhysand's eyes, sees her own broken body on the ground as members of the Spring Court begin to take off their masks in disbelief. But who's that? It's Man-Bear Pig, who, with the help from Lucien, takes a sword, spearing it through Amarantha's head as he rips out her throat. Ding dong, the queen is dead.
Huzzah! 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 We got so many huzzahs in this episode, everybody.
Tamlin grabs dead Feyre in his arms and begins to weep. Slowly, each of the 6 High Lords of Prythian come up and drop a glowing spark onto Feyre's chest. Tamlin kisses Feyre and gives her a glowing seed of his own. Nice. Chapter 46. She lives! But plot twist, she's High Fae. So everything's fine now, right? Nope. Later that day, Feyre is in a bedroom with Tamlin Nice as he heals her remaining injuries. But she's still in horror that she murdered 2 fairies. Technically, it's 3 fairies, but we're not thinking about Andros right now. Tamlin runs his hand over Feyre's new tat and promises that they will find a way out of this Rhysand deal. But enough talk. These 2 need to feel alive. And bang, bang, bangity bang. I said a bang, bang, bangity bang. That's never felt weirder than it has today. Later that night/day. What is time anyway? Feyre feels a tug on her navel and walks to an outside balcony where her and Rhysand begin to say their goodbyes. As Rhys goes to leave, though, his eyes widen in shock and he disappears. Yes, we will be talking about it. Feyre and Tamlin leave under the mountain, destroying the super convenient entrance to the Spring Court. Feyre notes how everything seems so peaceful, with Alice chasing her nephews, Lucien calling them to dinner, shouts to you, dining room. Feyre will face her actions soon, but for today, it's time to go home with her High Lord. Again, cue the Suriel. Not that one! End of book 1. Time for Akamath, baby!
Yay, Nicole! Thank you so much for our final Inner Circle debrief of ACOTAR. Just a few more episodes and the name of the section will make so much more sense, and I'm so excited.
Before you know it, we will be going back into the swing of things with the Spring Court, and that means businesses are open again. But Shopify has already taken the cash register online, helping millions of businesses sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can also power your in-person sales too? I bet they did that in the Spring Court. Give your point of sale system the upgrade it deserves with Shopify.
Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person, and it fits right into your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution.
Shopify is your powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. That way, you'll never run out of your delicious products. Plus, Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok, Instagram, and beyond. Hey, need some help? Shopify's award-winning support is right there for you every step of the way.
Shopify has a special offer for our listeners. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/FFG. And that's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/FFG to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/FFG. Do retail right with Shopify. It's time to step into the cauldron one last time for this first book of the ACOTAR series and discuss key insights, foreshadowing, theories, and so much more.
We are going to open on the last party, and boy, oh boy, is this a party to remember. Low-key, this night and the cell scene afterward. I think that this is my favorite group of scenes in the book. I love this part so much.
Really? Because mine is Isaac.
Oh, really? Yes, Isaac, average sex lover extraordinaire. How can I forget about his pivotal part in this series? Excuse me. He's definitely dead. He's definitely dead. I find it really interesting that Fae-vorite is dressed in a shade of sunset pink. Quote, the color too bright and feminine against the whirls of paint on my skin. This is a little nod here to the person that Fae-vorite is becoming, the bright colors. And we normally equate bright colors with things like spring. That tends to be in fashion. That tends to be when you wear the brighter colors. And it feels so at odds with who she is now.
We have to examine how the fairies are acting at this party compared to how they will act the following day for the trial. At tonight's party, Fae-vorite notices there is no glimmer of anticipation that they'll all be freed the next day. They're not acting like their entire world might be righted tomorrow. She thinks perhaps they knew I would die too. Now, let's jump ahead real quick and evaluate their behavior the next day. Absolute silence, where they're just staring at Fae-vorite, and everyone can feel how the fate of their world hangs in the air. A few of them will kindly offer Fae-vorite a gesture expressing farewell to the honored dead. We'll talk a lot more about that when we get to that section, but I did just want to compare those two right here. Now, back to tonight's party. I'm going to assume the same crowd is acting normal for a few reasons. Number one, they can't show anticipation or hope because Amarantha would do something bad to them ahead of the next day. And then number two, yes, they do think she is going to die, but there are feelings of gratitude for her valiant efforts. So in this moment, there would be, I'll say, no reason for them to act differently to get their hopes up or to treat her differently when they're under such watchful eyes. Whatever their reasons, though, my heart hurts for Fae-vorite in this moment. She is fighting to free Prythian, and it's like nobody cares. She's willing to give it her all. She's willing to die, and she feels so alone in this.
There's this moment in the scene that I never really caught until this deep dive, and that is that Rhysand is flirting with a, quote, supple-bodied fairy perched on his lap. I was kind of like, whoa, wait, what? In Mist and Fury, he will go on to flirt with Cressida. This is not the last time he's going to play this game here, but my best guess in this moment was to keep up with the ruse, It was just kind of jarring.
I thought the same thing. And then I wondered actually if he was purposefully not giving Fae-vorite the wine so she would be in better health the next day. Fae-vorite also even says something about how she's waiting for him to give the order to serve him. And I assume then that's when she would drink the wine too. And she doesn't drink the wine that last night because of the sequence of events. So anyway, I thought maybe that was his little way of procrastinating so she didn't have to drink the wine that night.
That's my new headcanon. That makes me a lot happier. That makes me a lot happier with Rhys. He's about to take some mad hot L's.
Oh gosh, yes, he is.
I need any joy with Rhys that I can. But speaking of people who are going to take a lot of L's this episode, Tamlin comes over, and Fae-vorite, who is so lost in waiting for Rhys to call her over, like Lexi was saying, she doesn't notice until she smells his rain and earthy scent that it is in fact Tamlin, who has been acting all Taylor Swift's I Forgot That You Existed. And he finally comes over and brushes the side of her hand. Quick side note here, whatever you want to say about Tamlin, and trust me, we will have a lot to say about Tamlin in this episode, the smell of rain and earth, that does sound really nice. It does make me wonder what his cleanliness routine under the mountain has been, considering she's been living in a cell. It was just a nice little, Tamlin, I bet you do smell really good. Good job, guy. I also remember so vividly reading this scene for the first time and being so excited. Oh my God, yay, Tamlin's taking her away to the room to fuck.
I thought a similar thing too. They've been so near and yet so far from each other for 3 months now. And Fae-vorite is fighting for him and to hold him again, for their love to have a chance. And her eyes are prickling with tears when his fingers press hers. And even though she's ashamed of the tattoo he's touching, she's still living in this moment. And all of us as readers were very much along for the ride this first time around.
Well, there was so much building up to this moment, right? His silence, her needing to see him and look him in the eyes. There's so much building up to this moment that you don't think twice when Tamlin takes her into this closet and makes out with her face. It's just, it seems like a natural progression until you read Mist and Fury and you're like, oh, actually, that's not right, sir. And speaking of, in hindsight, really, we need to talk about why Tamlin freaking did this. I am going to overlook the alternative of why you do this instead of trying to get her out, because to be honest, I don't know how he would have done that with how many eyes are on him in this moment. But so he takes her away to this other room and starts making out with her. Now, Quick notes here, because did Tamlin not think about this? Fae have a heightened sense of smell.
Think about anything. Like, I mean, if you want the answer to that question.
Well, I'm about to really dig into that. Fae have a heightened sense of smell. Might I remind you that Claire's body is still rotting on the fucking wall. And they would have smelled their like sexy time on them. Also, the paint. Did Tamlin not notice that paint is now all over his hands? Like, he is now covered in it. Here
with his two hands.
Here are my best guesses to this answer. Number one, I don't think he believes that Feyre is going to survive tomorrow. This is just calling out the polar opposite obvious between him and Rhysand, who does believe that Feyre is going to be their salvation. He made a freaking bet with her and said to Amarantha, oh, I can't wait to take her back to my house after all of this is over. He knows that she's going to, or he at least believes that she's going to make it out. Tamlin doesn't. He's looking at this experience together in this closet as their one last shot together. Number two, he's also had nothing to do. Let me actually rephrase. He's done nothing but sit on a throne next to Amarantha and kept a tight leash on his emotions and control. This is his control finally slipping and erupting out of him. Maybe not the way he wants to be erupting, but you know what I mean. As Feyre walks in after him, he is like immediately on her, even describing their makeout sesh as a war dance. I love that language there.
And I just have to plug in the screaming fiddles too, because that is quite a description. Screaming fiddles. Oh man.
I never thought I would know exactly what that meant until I read it. And I was like, I know exactly what sound that is. Yes. But Feyre is just as desperate for him. We can't think of this as one-sided. Granted, I think that it's because she has been wanting anything from him, and she finally sees this as also her last chance to be with him in this way. Reason number three that Tamlin is being this way. This is Tamlin. He is not thinking several steps ahead. He might have considered the paint and the smell, but I'm actually leaning towards he didn't, based off of how he reacts after Rhysand catches them together. And number four, there is a large part of Tamlin who has also been broken under this mountain. We're going to see that a lot in the first few chapters of Mist and Fury. Having to watch his best friend Lucien and then his lover get beaten over and over again and feeling like he can't do anything about it. This is traumatic. And there's a part of Tamlin who will wildly remain broken after this experience, which is why when Rhys tells him to buckle his belt and leave, he does it on command, much to Feyre's horror. Also find it interesting that there are no words shared between these two. They have other priorities, like getting in each other's bodies, and they're trying to keep it quiet, so it makes sense. But on a reread, it feels so much driven by lust versus driven by love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously, this is an entirely different set of circumstances, but it does call to the attention of Rhys's goodbyes right before they go into battle in ACOTAR. Might I remind you of his beautiful quote, I would have waited 500 more years for you, 1,000 years. And if this was all the time we were meant to have, the wait was worth it. Very different than, excuse me, come to this closet with me. I'm not going to talk to you at all. I'm just going to make out with your face.
In the early chapters of ACOMAF, Feyre acknowledges that the lust is never the issue between her and Tamlin. It's their communication that is a repeated challenge, which shows on the page even right here. It's so easy for the two of them to be wrapped up in each other with their lustful chemistry, is what I'll call it. But when it really matters, when they can't rely on this lust, their relationship falls apart. This is teeing us up for that, where lusting after each other is easy, but communication is hard.
I think what bothers me the most about this scene is, yes, Tamlin does not think she's going to survive tomorrow. To be fair, Feyre doesn't either. But Tamlin isn't trying to comfort her. He's not trying to give her any words of advice, wisdom, or anything to help her survive the day tomorrow. He has given up on the idea that there will be a life for her after this. And honestly, for him, he thinks he's stuck under the mountain forever. He's given up. And therefore, he just wants to feel her one last time. It is selfish. It is selfish. And it's not supportive, Tamlin. It's not supportive. I'm going to go off on that later, but for now, that's what I will say.
Like you said, Nicole, on a first read, you don't really think much into this. You know, he hasn't been able to do, say, show anything towards Feyre because he's got watchful eyes on him. Fair. And we can understand his strategy that Lucien laid out. If he reacts, Amarantha will know how to set him off by hurting Feyre. However, When you think more closely about this moment, Tamlin has thrown his strategy to the wind right now, not because he has a better idea or a last opportunity to get Feyre to safety, but because he wants to hold her, touch her, squeeze her. You said how you're going to overlook the question, why did you do this instead of getting her out? And while you give great reasons for why is he doing this in the first place, I'm now going to lay into Tamlin on what he should have done. Because hindsight's 20/20, folks.
Get it, girl. Yes.
And I should also say, last episode, I was not mad at Tamlin for how he didn't react to Feyre because he was playing his own dangerous game. However, I made it clear I was mad at him for not coming up with any other plan when, despite Amarantha keeping a watchful eye on him, he could have at least tried. If he had come up with any other plan, this moment could have been to sneak her out. Ally with the Summer Court because, hey, they're doing something. Have Lucian help usher her out because, hey, he's doing stuff. I'm not saying anything would have worked, but it's the effort of trying. Now, we also have to ask the question, would Feyre have escaped if given the chance? Because I honestly don't know if she could live with herself leaving all of Perithian under the mountain when she was finally at the third task, because she does have some hope for herself. Yes, she does ultimately mostly think that she's going to die, but especially from the music that gave her that breath of hope there that she's really holding on to as she goes into this final task. Let's not forget, she needed to come to the Spring Court's rescue because she at least needed to try. I know, I'm still talking about that. And if Tamlin didn't join her in this escape, I definitely don't think she would have left him. Like, if he was not going with her, she would not have left. His previous argument of protecting Feyre from being put in more danger is null and void here, because what Tamlin and Feyre do with this makeout session is absolutely putting her back in major danger. So if you're going to risk everything on the eve of her final trial, maybe, just maybe, have that risk include saving her.
I don't even think he thought about it. Like, I don't even think that crossed his mind as an option. Because he's given up. Like, he has given into his fate. It is only Rhys who is doing the puppet mastering behind the scenes. At least that we know of.
At least
Maybe
we know of. Yes. So, in conclusion, Tamlin, you get a double L for thinking with your dick here. The double L stands for lusty loser. You are a lusty loser, sir.
Well, he's not the only one. Rhys, buddy, get ready to take some L's. Oh boy. I bet you anything it was the mating bond or their bond between the two of them that told him where Feyre was in the crowd and that she was sneaking off, because it was not long that she was in the room with Tamlin before Rhys was like, excuse me. Oh God, this cough. Hence why they got caught so fast. And he literally walked through the walls to catch them.
He might have also felt her arousal through the bond, took one glance around the room and is like, oh, she and Tamlin are missing. I know exactly what this means.
You know what? I bet you're right. And I bet he was like, that's not for me.
That's not for me.
Where is she? Now, the quote, look what you've done to my pet, is God. L number one. I know he's playing a game. I know he's trying to be a double, like whatever. Doesn't matter. L still dished out for Rhys right here. But then Rhysand starts listing off about how Amarantha would find them here together and what she would do. How she would, quote, stay true to habit and probably punish Lucian. He still has one eye after all. I love the fact that—
Why am I laughing?
I love the fact that even Rhys notes how Lucian is always a collateral damage under the mountain. He's like, you guys know— poor Lucian, like poor fucking Lucian. Yes, Rhysand is looking like an asshole here, but he is reminding Tamlin, who has lost his slip on his control and his ability to see the whole picture, if he even ever had that ability in the first place. He is reminding them of what is at stake. He's like, you idiots, don't you know what we can lose here if Amarantha catches you? And also his entire mastermind plan is on the line here. So I think he's pissed that they risked it like that. As Tamlin leaves, oh God, quote, Tamlin's green eyes flickered as they continued to stare into mine. He softly said, I love you. This is his goodbye. Let me try that one more time. This is his goodbye? Dude! She has confessed her love in front of everyone under the mountain multiple times, getting snickers and laughs and embarrassment in return. And he can't even say it with passion in front of Rhys?
What is he supposed to say in this moment? Like, good luck, my darling. I'll see you on the other side of tomorrow.
How about I believe in you? You can do this, sweetheart. I know you can make support. But I love you as a goodbye here. It's not a I love you, I believe in you, babe. It's a I love you. have fun dying tomorrow. I'm so mad.
I don't know if I call it that, but I see what you mean. I also have to wonder if he knows right now that his Heart of Stone will play an important role in tomorrow. He has to know it'll play into this game somehow, since he can't say anything about it to Feyre, and he's made sure she overhears his key detail all throughout the book, in which case he could have given maybe a final hint, even saying something like, "You really have a Heart of Stone, Rhys," because he also does, which I'll talk about later, and Rhys could reply with, "Takes one to know one," or something to that effect. I don't know.
You're telling me that there could have been another answer to another answer except for "I love you."
Yes, but at least he does say "I love you." Like, I will give him that. I don't know. So many woulda, coulda, shouldas. But bottom line, Tamlin walks away with his tail between his legs.
Alrighty. Rhysand, we love you, but oh my God, this is about to get bad.
This is bad.
After Tamlin leaves with his tail between his legs, Feyre calls him a pig. Do you actually intend to put yourself at my mercy, or are you truly that stupid? This is something that Nesta would say. This is rude. Rude, Rhys.
He's mad at her for being so childishly in love and taking stupid risks when he's risking everything to save her. I don't know. I probably would have said the same thing. Like, he's so stupid.
I'm saying he's wrong. I'm just saying it's rude. Now, we will get all the clarity in Chapter 54. We're going to talk a lot about Chapter 54 today, that he was jealous of Tamlin. Might I remind you that Rhysand also did just have another woman on top of him, but okay. And Rhysand is pissed off that Tamlin used this moment to be with her rather than get her out. We've talked about that endlessly. But telling her that she's a fool, not the best way to deal with that anger. Even if he is playing this like she must hate me role, because later he does kind of nix that role and lets a lot of his guard down. He goes on to say in the scene, quote, "How did you not think that someone would notice you were gone? You should thank the Cauldron Lucian's delightful brothers weren't watching you." He's also pissed that like his whole plan was about to go out the fucking window because of two horny bunnies. So I will give him that.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
It's still mean though. It's still mean.
Yes.
This is one of my favorite parts of the scene. Feyre asks him, quote, "What do you care?" To which Rhys replies, "What do I care? What do I care?" Wow, is this loaded, and we need to talk about it. He cares because he is risking everything for the sake of Prythian and their freedom. Not just the Spring Court, the entirety of Prythian. Way to go, Rhys. He cares because his family that he desperately wants to get back to is in Valaris, and he hasn't spoken or seen them in 50 years. He cares because he's been a sex slave to Amarantha and has become a shell of himself. He cares because he deeply cares for this human woman who is throwing it all away and sees him as a monster. He cares because of his master plan that he's been fighting for months, if not years. I could go on and on. I love that he is asking, "What do I care?" and his wings come out. Feyre describes them again as glorious. But this is Rhysand losing his control and his primal form coming to the surface. But we don't get a chance to hear why he cares because people start walking towards them and he forcefully kisses Feyre and touches her. Bad look, Rhys. Bad.
Bee's bad. Bee's real bad, Rhys. Bee's bad.
But like every L we give Rhys, we know that it's a double-edged sword. It does not negate this L, though, because forcing her at all is a big L, if not triple L. At Starfall, during a thought-for-a-thought moment, Rhysand will tell Feyre that he wishes he could take this exact kiss back because, quote, "I didn't make it pleasant for you, and I was jealous and pissed off, and I knew that you hated me." He saw no other choice in this moment but to kiss her in this claiming way because of the smudged paint from Tamlin and because of the scent on Feyre and Tamlin's kiss. Remember, Fae have heightened sense of smell. They could smell the glooming, like about to be
the musk.
The musk. They could smell the musk. The man bear pig musk in the room. And so this is hence why Rhysand's tongue is described as sweeping over the roof of my mouth against my teeth, claiming my mouth. He has to literally, like a squeegee sponge, wipe out all Tamlin's scent from her mouth and instead get his scent on her. Again, he is covering up Tamlin and Feyre's brashness. But this is still an L, even though there is a mastermind plan in the background.
Sometimes the reason, it just doesn't completely negate the actual action reaction. And that's the situation right here. We can understand why he's doing this because once again, he is saving Feyre in a twisted way, in a downright twisted and horrible place where he does have to play dirty. But Rhys, baby, consent. And like, again, we can't excuse it. There wasn't time for him to be like, follow my lead, but I wish there was another way. Not in a mad at the writing kind of way, but in a mad at the character kind of way. Because again, we have to remember that Rhys is morally gray and we will not approve of everything he does. I think that's a good thing for these characters because he needs to have some complexity. And this is definitely one of those big instances, especially with Rhys.
Yeah. Pivoting from Rhys, we have to talk about Tamlin's reaction to all of this. His eyes go wide when he and Amarantha open the door and see this coupling happening in front of him. And he puts on this mask of stone. There's that word stone, by the way. I love that they bring stone up multiple times in this chapter and the next chapter as priming us for the Heart of Stone. And he stalks off towards the dais, keeping his back towards her, quote, as if he couldn't stand to look. I get that he is defeated. I get that he's angry and jealous. But to not even look at his girl who is risking everything for him before her final trial, again, this is goodbye time, Tamlin. Like, you know this is not her fault. Don't put that on her and fuck with her head the night before she attempts to save your entire court.
He's being possessive and pissy, causing Feyre to carry extra shame about his reaction, feeling like she has to explain herself so he understands the truth. But we can't forget he put her in this situation in the first place. And yet she's the one who needs to explain herself. Red flag, red flag, red flag.
I need a tiny red flag, I feel like, to have on the podcast. Like a little tiny one.
We're just going to have to like literally have our whole arm up as we do the first few episodes of ACOTAR then.
Oh, it's not funny, but it's funny when you put it like that. You gotta have some kind of humor.
We gotta find the humor in this. Yep.
Now, thank goodness we are going to be going to the Night Court and the Inner Circle soon. I do not think my heart can take many more moments with Tamlin like this because every time we get one of these, I just get angrier and angrier. Like, this infuriates me that he is not supportive of her the night before her final trial, before she saves his whole court.
I love how we've had some listeners say like that they're really getting good workouts in during these last few episodes because we're so angry and they just channel it. I love it. I love it. Shouts to you if you're working out right now. To your point there about the Inner Circle, I just started reading ACOMAF again in preparation for next week's episode 1 deep dive, and oh dear. Oh my God, it's going to be so bad for our Timmy Tam. But just get us to the Inner Circle now, please, so we can stop bitching about Tamlin and I can become unhinged with Cassian, my number one book boyfriend. I can't wait
for Silver Flames. I'm like, there's
I don't. Yeah, that's
on this podcast.
I don't even know how we're going to handle that yet. But back to this scene. Let's quickly note Amarantha's reaction too, because she's laughing outwardly, but inwardly, she's starting to piece a few things together. She realized for the first time that Rhys was jealous of Tamlin. While Rhys is giving the laughing crowd a lazy, self-indulgent grin and actually bowing, something sparks in Amarantha's eyes. That something sparking is her jealousy, but she's covering it up by laying it on thick how these humans are all the same, how Feyre doesn't really love Tamlin because a human's love is fickle, which I really do think she does believe, hence why she made the answer to her riddle love, because she thinks it's impossible for a human to figure out.
She's such a good villain. I love her.
Brr. We know it's cold under the mountain, and I bet they need temperature regulating sheets. If you wake up too cold or too hot, we here at Fantasy Fangirls highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature regulating bedding so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long.
I'm obsessed with the self-cooling feature from my Miracle Made sheets. Brett is the surface of the sun when he sleeps. And so these have been an absolute game changer for both of our abilities to get to bed and sleep well. And even better, they are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh for 3 times longer than other sheets. So I know that when I'm going to sleep, I'm both comfy and clean.
Go to trymiracle.com marycole.com/FF to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo FF at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund.
Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/FF and use code FF to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/FF to treat yourself. Thank you so much, Miracle Made, for sponsoring today's episode. Rhysand then enters Feyre's cell, and I'm not going to lie, on my first read of this, I was like, what is he doing here? I was flabbergasted that he walked in, and I was not a fan because I was a little pissed at Rhys.
Like many things in this book, we get an explanation for this from Rhys in chapter 54. After telling Feyre to leave the hall, Amarantha took Rhys to her bed because she saw that Rhys was jealous of Tamlin, and she kept him there longer than usual to squeeze answers out of him. He told her what she wanted to hear, that Feyre was human garbage, that she was nothing, and he'd use and discard her. And then he really wanted to see Feyre one last time alone.
There's this moment when he walks into her cell that his tunic is unbuttoned at the top. It's just a little hint as to what he was just doing. He's also showing in the scene how pissed he is at his life situations right now. Fairly so. Saying, quote, "That damn bitch is running me ragged." Lucian lost an eye for saying that kind of language to her, and Rhysand is just telling this to Feyre. Again, from chapter 54 as to why he's here in the cell. Quote, "Afterward, I wanted to see you one last time, alone. I thought about telling you everything, but who I'd become, who you thought I was, I didn't dare shatter that deception." It is fascinating to think about the what ifs here. What if he did tell her everything? And when I think of everything, I think of like the chapter 54 style of everything. I don't think she would have taken it very well. I mean, she doesn't take it well after she hears it from the Suriel after spending months with him. Imagine if he told her here. Not great. But in this moment in her cell, it's the most candid he's been with her up until this moment. He's letting his walls down. He does even tell her most of his plan, his master plan with Tamlin, and making him mad and causing him to, kill Amarantha because of that anger that Rhysand's been stirring up in the background.
Well, now I do want to note here that Rhys doesn't truly know that Feyre is his mate until Amarantha is torturing her the following day. He subconsciously really does suspect it, but I was under the impression his tell you everything is that he's a double agent, like you said, his master plan, and he's been having glimpses of her over the last several years. Essentially everything except the words, "and we're mates." Surprise!
That is what I meant. Thank you for mentioning that.
I
didn't make that clear. Thank you.
Yeah, because it is a little bit confusing about the timeline of when he knows, because he does subconsciously think it, and then he kind of gradually keeps suspecting it more and more, especially after the bargain bond. And then it really clicks in when Amarantha is torturing her. And then it literally snaps into place when they're outside. And that's when he's like, oh my God, this is actually real, not just in my head kind of thing. I don't know. Yeah.
No, I think that's exactly it. Also, he wanted to see her for this one last time, even though, to be honest, it didn't really seem like he wanted to see her that much when he walks into her cell. Feyre asks him, "What do you want?" And he says, quote, "A moment of peace and quiet." He snapped.
One could argue this phrasing of one last time is similar to Tamlin's wanting to be with Feyre one last time that we were just talking about a few minutes ago. And we were giving Tamlin a very hard time, and we are not giving Rhys the same kind of hard time here. Well, for obvious reasons, but I really do want to read this as one last time alone. That's his key word here. One last time where Feyre is not under Tamlin's thumb. One last time where they can candidly be together alone without the shadow of Tamlin looming over him, back when she, with her spending 3 weeks in the spring court and then 1 week in the night court. Will they have alone time in the night court a week out of every month? Yes, and I can't explain it, but it's different here in the dungeon, in this hellhole together. That is what he means by this last time alone, where they can really be, I'll say, vulnerable with each other. It's the vulnerable opportunity that he considers the last time for them to be alone together.
When Feyre asks him why he's telling her this, he says, quote, because I'm tired and lonely, and you're the only person I can talk to without putting myself at risk. Last episode, Feyre mentions how she can't seem to keep her mouth shut whenever she's around Rhysand. And yes, that is the mating bond definitely here at play. And I bet you anything that he has a very similar experience with her. Also, the lonely part of the sentence is heartbreaking, knowing who he is lonely for. He misses his bat boys, he misses his cousin, and he misses, of course, the tiny monster of his second. But even when he goes back, he will still be haunted by this time under the mountain. And it's not until Feyre helps put him back together that he finally embraces everything that he has with his family again.
And he's lonely wanting Feyre too when he can't have her. He's purposefully an arrogant dick to make her hate him as he's playing this double agent. And so it's like he's pushing her away when all he wants to do is bring her close. And he's doing both literally at the same time.
God damn it, I love this man. I love him so much. I don't care if we just gave him so many L's. I don't care. I love him so much. Rhysand finally tells Feyre at least the semi-whole truth of his mastermind plan under the mountain. Lex went through most of this last episode, so I'm just going to do the highlight reel here, really. Number one, he wanted to piss off Tamlin as much as possible, hence the bargain, the tattoo, the painting and parading Feyre, forcing her to drink wine, making her dance for him every night. The list goes on and on. He did a thorough job. In hopes that the second the curse will break on the Spring Court, he, Tamlin, will splatter Amarantha all over the walls.
Feyre even questions that if Amarantha captured Tamlin's power once, what'll stop her from doing it again? To which Rhys replies, Tamlin won't be tricked again so easily. Amarantha's greatest strength is holding the High Lord's power and controlling them through their contained power. But this does not mean that she can access and tap into these powers herself. It's honestly a really cool bit of magic for a villain, right? So the idea here is that the moment Tamlin gets his power back, there's no stopping him, his powers and his wrath against Amarantha.
Number two, he painted Feyre and only smudged her paint on her waist and her arms to claim his innocence in hopes to avoid a fight with Tamlin that would literally bring down their sacred mountain in the middle. This is excluding the paint smudging that happened last night because Tamlin started it. I love that Rhys is finally telling Feyre all of this, but could he not have told her sooner? At least when he started drugging her. Don't like that sentence. He could have told her the reasons why. I know he didn't trust her enough to not blow his cover, but he could have at least commanded her not to speak a word about it, just like he commanded the guards not to touch her.
Hold up. That's mind control. Is that really better than forcing her to drink the fairy wine without explaining why?
Maybe it's
just
the questioner. The questioner in me says, yeah, it is better. It is better, actually. But you make a good point.
Nothing's good here.
Would you rather mind control or constant drugging? I think I'd rather mind control, at least knowing the reasons why in the background.
Oh, God, I probably go the same way, actually.
Later, as she literally I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but as she has dagger number 1 ready to kill fairy number 1, she will think about how if she kills him, this will unleash Tamlin upon Amarantha. She would not have had that extra keep your eye on the prize, Feyre, without the information that Rhysand is giving her here. I argue if she had known this information earlier about Rhysand's master plan, she would have had that goal. We've talked about, it's been a while since we talked about it, but Feyre is a very goal-oriented person. If she had had that goal, that eye on the prize from, I won't say the beginning, but at least from the drugging, at least from when the drugging started, I don't think she would have shattered under the mountain as much. She still would have, because it's extremely traumatic what she's going under. But I don't think she would have shattered as much because she would have known the greater purpose at play much more so and much clearer.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there.
In this download, though, I do have a short and sweet piece of dating advice for Rhys. Rhys mentions how, quote, "Believe me, I would have liked nothing more than to enjoy you, but there are bigger things at stake than taking a human woman to my bed." I'm not opposed to this, obviously. But maybe just don't say it like this. Enjoy you sounds so self-serving. I don't like it. It does give some quote, I want you splayed out on the table like my own personal feast vibes. But while that makes me want to leap and jump into this man's arms because we have more context, this one feels more to me like I'm going to use you as a one-night stand and then discard you.
If we're talking semantics, enjoy you is Rhys getting off, while splaying her out on a table is getting enjoyment from her getting off.
Yes, that's exactly it.
A small comparison here between Rhys and Tamlin as leaders of their courts. Rhys says his territory is the bigger thing at stake than taking Feyre to bed, which, the irony, but anyway, he assumes Tamlin has expressed similar sentiments to Feyre, but Feyre thinks to herself that Tamlin hasn't said anything like that about protecting his territory or his people. She brushes it off, thinking he wasn't able to because of the curse. But expressing dedication and wanting to fight for your territory doesn't seem to be within the confines of the curse. Yet here Feyre is once again making excuses for Tamlin. Tamlin was willing to sacrifice his entire court for Feyre's safety. Have I mentioned that yet? And he does not show them much love in ACOTAR, to the point where they all leave the Spring Court and he's miserable and alone. I don't think Tamlin ever expressed sentiments like these, not because of the curse, but because he doesn't think the same way that Rhys or care about his territory the same way that Rhys does. And in the scene here, Rhys is having to remind Feyre that this whole situation is bigger than her and Tamlin. It's about all of Prythian, which, yes, she does understand, but only to an extent. She needs to hear this, that this is all way bigger than her and Tamlin, before she heads into what she must do for the third task.
Oh, beautiful. Beautifully said. But we learn a very important piece of news. Feyre asks why Amarantha made Rhys her whore, and he tells her that his father killed Tamlin's father and brothers and wife, but he left that part out. This is rather interesting to learn for Feyre because Tamlin has notably not talked about this part of the story. It is just the beginning of Tamlin leaving her in the dark while Rhys is bringing information forward into the light. It is fascinating to me knowing the animosity that Tamlin has towards Rhys, especially after the head in the garden situation. You'd think that he would just also say it there just to, I'm not going to say seem more like the victim of the Night Court, but I'm not going to not say it that way.
I'm going to say that I think he feels a lot of shame about his role in all of that because his family killed Rhys's family first.
Well, Tamlin wouldn't tell that part of the story, obviously.
Of course not. But I think that just the whole situation causes him so much shame that he doesn't even want to talk about the part that would make him more of a victim because it opens up how he's not a victim,
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. I agree with you there. This short scene in the cell brings Feyre to one conclusion, though. Quote, regardless of his motives or his methods, Rhysand was keeping me alive and had done so even before I set foot under the mountain. There it is! I mentioned last episode that I started calling Rhysand the Snape character, and right here is it on full display. Feyre, going forward, will have a I won't say much, a less hostile relationship with Rhysand. Yes, she still doesn't like him. She throws a shoe at him, for goodness sake. But she no longer sees him as this monster. And it's because of this information that he finally shares with her in this cell.
It's when she really starts thinking of him as a real person instead of that monster there. Yes. And she's like you said, she still won't like him. Like, she just wants to hate him, even after everything he did under the mountain when he tried to save her life. But she just can't. She's getting such mixed signals from him, understandably, but this is indeed when she starts to see him as a real person. Yeah. Let's also emphasize how she realizes he has been her protector even before she was under the mountain. This whole book, Tamlin has been painted as Feyre's protector, but that narrative completely shifted when she went under the mountain. Now it's Rhys, and this change has been really jarring for her as she tries to understand and grapple with the fact that Tamlin is no longer her protector, that she can't rely on him. However, her enemy seems to be doing what the person she trusted can't do or isn't doing.
Isn't doing is definitely the operative words phrasing there. The last thing I want to pull from the scene is as Rhys is leaving, Feyre tells him, quote, when you healed my arm, you didn't need to bargain with me. You could have demanded every single week of the year, every single week, and I would have said yes. To which Rhys replies, I know. What I want to ask us here is, Feyre mentions how it wasn't entirely a question, but she needed to know the answer. Answer to what? I'm reading this as answer to Rhys knowing he could have had her 24/7, but he specifically did not want to take that, I'll call it freedom. He didn't want to take that freedom away from her.
Yes,
freedom
I do
quotes.
think that's it. Why didn't he push for more when he knew he could have had more? I think that's the question that she's really asking here. Why didn't he push for more when he knew he could have gotten more? And while Feyre doesn't get a real answer here, he says, I know, she at least gets that confirmation that he could have. If he really wanted to be the monster he's made out to be, he would have, but he didn't. And therefore, again, she's starting to think of him as a real person with other motives.
He also didn't want to hurt her by taking her away from her love, Tamlin. He was willing to let her marry him, for goodness sake, then call in his bargain. He thinks that it would make her the happiest, but selfishly, he still wanted that 1 week. This also might not be on his conscious mind necessarily, but I could see him unconsciously knowing that her and Tamlin aren't compatible, and he wants to give them the opportunity to literally their relationship to self-implode on its own so that she chooses to be elsewhere, whether that's with him or on her own and getting to explore life on her by herself. There also might be a part of him, I'm not going to say also, there is definitely a part of him that doesn't feel like he's worthy of being happy, of being with his mate or even with someone he deeply cares about because he hasn't realized the mating bond yet. But also in ACOMAF, quote, "You don't think I know how stories get written, how this story will get written? I am the dark lord who stole away the bride of spring. I am the demon in a nightmare and I will meet a bad end. He is the golden prince and the hero who will get to keep you as his reward for not dying of stupidity and arrogance." Say it louder for the people in the back. I love it. But if he had taken this all away from her day one, this would have been the story, and he fears it so much. So this would have been the story that revolves around his name.
Retweet all of that. The only other thing I'll add in here that we will talk at the end of this episode, but he does think to himself, I think it's in chapter 54, that he wants to call in the bargain just once, just to check on her. And he knows that he will, but he doesn't. And then he'll release her from the bargain. Just wants to check on her once. But of course, right here, none of that's, he's not going to say that.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Are you ready, Lexi?
No.
It's time to talk about the final task. Lexi's favorite chapter in this entire book that she's read once other than this deep dive.
I literally skip over this part because I can't take it. I can't take it. I can't.
Last episode, we called out the weird and uncomfortable parallel between Amarantha and Rhys using the word darling. Well, here's another one. Amarantha picks a fleck of dust off of her gown. I think Amarantha actually just wants to be like Rhys. I think she just, for lack of a better term, is living in his shadow.
Yeah, well, get in line, Amarantha. Oh. Everybody wants to be like Rhys.
I just got a new shirt. It's a black button down. And if I have it like parted even top, like a little bit at the top, I feel like such a badass Rhys-Ann, and I'm so here for it. It makes me feel so good. As I was working on this part of the outline, I started tearing up just at how far our girl Feyre has come. The crowd is silent and she thinks, quote, "It was a gift that gave me courage, that made me bunch my fists, that made me embrace the tattoo on my arm. I had beaten her until now, fairly or not, and I will not feel alone when I died." Oh my God. Beautiful writing. Perfect writing. Remember right after the lost member of the Blue Man group died, she told Tamlin that the reason she stayed with him for so long was because she didn't want to feel alone when she died either. She isn't alone here. The fairies who sneered and bet against her, gawked at her even when she was dancing for Rhys, now look at her with silence and their freedom in her hands. Should have been a little nicer to her. 2 hands.
These fairies have seen what she's been through, and they admire this brave little human who is there to try to save them, even if they don't think she's going to win. Like Feyre thinks, it's not malicious, it's camaraderie and understanding. And I just love how Feyre views it like this instead of being bitter. It helps her lift her head up high to face this final task. Because like you said, she's not alone and they're all against Amarantha together. She has given them hope in a dark place, and she recognizes their appreciation for this. Instead of her death breaking them like Amarantha intends, it will rally them. Very Hunger Games-esque. She's the spark that lights the flame, and if she dies, the whole place will burn down. I don't remember if that's exactly a quote, but it reminds me of the Hunger Games there. In a little while, when Amarantha is cracking her jokes and expecting the crowd to laugh like usual, they stay silent, a small but impactful way of defying her. As Feyre thinks, they too would face my potential death with whatever dignity they had left. However, their silence is the gift that gives her courage, because they are all in this together. They are all in this together, and she will not die alone. However, this is so interesting. However, Tamlin's silence, even if it's not actually Tamlin, but Tamlin's silence is killing her. Two opposite kinds of silence here happening at the exact same time with two very different emotional outcomes.
We've heard before that this crowd of fairies are so clean, they're so well dressed. And it makes you wonder about how they're treating that beautiful Fae hair. And I don't know about you, Lex. I was super skeptical about all these custom beauty treatments. My feed is flooded with customize this and personalize that and hoobity blah, all promising to fix the straw-like dyed texture of my hair. But when Prose says custom, they actually mean it. It's no gimmick. Your formula could not exist without you.
That's right. Each and every bottle of Prose custom hair and skincare is made to order and personalized. Mine literally has my name on the bottles with a unique blend of naturally powerful and proven effective ingredients to meet your needs. Their in-depth consultation analyzes over 80 factors for a complete view of your life and beauty goals.
Prose covers everything from your concerns to your diet, your exercise, your stress levels, to uncover what is actually impacting your hair and your skin health. They even asked me about the dryness in the air in which I live. And if you've been to Colorado, you know that you basically turn into a raisin when you land here. And they took the lack of humidity in the air to heart when crafting my personal treatment. I'm obsessed with it.
I absolutely love how Prose is directly treating my naturally wavy hair. I've been too scared to embrace it before, but now if you're watching on YouTube, look! For once, I didn't straighten or curl it because these natural waves are just so lovely. Try Prose for yourself and get your healthiest hair in 30 days or your money back.
Prose is so confident that you'll love your results that they're offering our listeners an exclusive trial offer so you can see the difference custom hair care makes. You can get 50% off your first subscription order at prose.com/fantasy fangirls. That's PROSE.com/fantasy fangirls for your free consultation and 50% off your one-of-a-kind formulas. Prose.com/fantasy fangirls. Thank you, Prose. And then the task begins, and oh boy, here we go.
We explained last episode how each of these three trials symbolically represent a part of Feyre's Book 1 journey, and the third task is no exception. First task, Feyre had to rely on her survival and hunting skills, which she succeeded in doing. Second task, she had to face her insecurity of being illiterate and had to trust someone else, accept their help despite her shame and not being able to do this on her own. And the third task, it brings our story full circle, where Feyre has to face what she did to Andris and reopen this wound she has worked so hard to heal and better herself, becoming a loving soul. Now she has to purposefully rip herself apart with full context of what she's doing, what she has to do to free Prythian. Right now, she has to come to terms and follow through with her ability to murder a fairy in the worst imaginable way, killing several, again, with deliberation and intent. Literally while their families are crying watching this happen and looking these fairies in the eye. My heart can't take this chapter. I think this might be like the most heart-wrenching thing I have ever read.
It's described as, quote, a door swung open and 3 figures, 2 male and 1 female, with brown sacks tied over their heads, were dragged in by the guards. For whatever reason, the 2 males, 1 female line just completely went over my head on first read, and I was convinced it was going to be the Archeron family, or at least that the last person would be her father or Lucian, because that would be so on brand for how Lucian is treated under the mountain. I'm pretty sure I even thought about Rhys, since we hadn't really seen him in the crowd yet. But Tamlin was probably the last person I expected to be behind door number 3.
I was the same thing as you. I was convinced it was her family or people she knew. Like, I was half expecting poor sweet Isaac. There he is again. If it wasn't her sisters or father.
I realized Isaac had such a hold over you in this story.
I went back to our text exchange where I was live texting you as I was listening to this part of the audiobook back in August 2023. And oh my goodness, it was a trip. So I'm going to share with all of you some of what this text exchange was. I refused at first to keep listening because I was convinced it was her family and I literally couldn't take it. I even said, this is why I don't read new books. I can't handle the suspense.
For context, you've been rereading the re-listening to the Harry Potter series for probably 8 years on repeat, just over and over again.
With some Game of Thrones thrown in there and some memoirs of a geisha. Yeah. Yes, I reread the same books again and again. Yes. So I asked Nicole for the spoiler confirmation that it was not her family she has to kill because I refused to read it otherwise. And when Nicole assured me it was not her family, then I spiraled thinking it was Alice and her boys. Like that would work with the 2 males and 1 female. And Nicole promised that it wasn't them either. And then I'm like, then who the F is it? And that's when she's like, oh my God, you need to just stop texting me and just keep listening to this book. Like I promise you, just keep listening.
And I stand by it. I stand by my words to you. At first, I was really surprised that the first 2 fairies were people that she didn't know. But in hindsight, I think it actually made this experience worse for Feyre. The first 2 fairies were completely innocent strangers to her. If she had known them, she might have been able to have some kind of, whether that's conversation or even just knowing their character, knowing that they would forgive her and know that the greater mission was worth it, giving her some peace, giving her some closure with this. But no, she will never get to know these fairies' names or even their thoughts on this subject, whether they knew beyond their final words and actions. This is leaving her always wondering and never getting the closure. Again, Amarantha sucks, but she's kind of a brilliant villain. Oh boy, here we go. Okay. The task is simple. Stab each of these innocent fairies in the heart with a polished ash dagger. Remember, ash is one of the only things that actually kills fairies. The attention to detail here is quite genius on Amarantha's part. I swear I'm not Team Amarantha. I just think she's a very smart villain. Feyre has to reach for a new dagger each time she has to kill them to feel the agony of reaching again and again. Quote, wanting me to mean it. Mean it is in italics. This is preying on her number one trait, one of her number one traits, I should say, needing to protect the helpless. She was feeding her family. She freed the Suriel. She eased the lost member of the Blue Man group to death because he was helpless. But this time she cannot help them, only offer them cold-blooded murder. Good stuff.
In order to help everyone, she has to kill the innocent. And the situation would go perfectly in a philosophy class because objectively, emphasis on objectively, this is the right thing to do without any other options to save Prythian. And I say that very hesitantly because please don't come after me. Objectively, it is the right thing to do.
I will hold hand in hand with you on this. If I was in Feyre's position, which I fucking hope I'm never in that position ever, I would do the same thing. I would be destroyed on the inside, but alas, like you're saying, this is for the greater good, the thing to do. Ugh.
I hate saying that.
I hate that
but
too.
It's
Does
true.
that make us bad people?
I don't like. Again, it's the classic trolley situation. Do you kill one person to save 10, or do you let those 10 people die in order to save that one person there? If you watch The Good Place, I always think of that scene where like they literally replay this again and again.
Amarantha mentions to Feyre how Feyre can refuse this task, but Amarantha will kill her in exchange. Amarantha is betting that Feyre will most likely refuse, but only when she gets to the last victim, Tamlin. This is the quote, "You'll be lucky, my darling, if we have enough left of you to burn." She's not talking about physically, like she's fighting a dragon where like she'll be incinerated. She's emotionally discussing there will be enough left of you to burn. There's not enough of her left in her soul, in her spirit to play with, which is so messed up. Speaking of messed up, let's talk about High Fae number 1. Oh God. I took the brunt here, so you sure did, and I really appreciate it. I'm just gonna sit here just with my head in my hands. Oh. SJM is a brilliant writer. We are going through these emotions, these back and forth, deeply feeling them with Feyre, but we also get Feyre's painter's eye coming in here in the most horrifically beautiful way. Quote, "His eyes were the color of the sky I'd never see again if I refused to kill him. A color I'd never get out of my mind, never forget no matter how many times I'd painted it." He shook his head, his eyes growing so large that the white shone around them. He would never see that sky either, and neither would these people if I failed. You can literally feel the push and the pull that she's feeling in this moment. In my opinion, this is one of the hardest ones to read of the 3, with this pleading and Feyre telling him that she's sorry, but knowing that it's not enough. She thinks about how someone in the crowd starts weeping and how he might be loved by someone in the same way that she loves Tamlin.
Oh, the people in the crowd were such a gut-wrenching addition as they connect each of these Faes to a family, to a life of someone who is loved and cared about. And Feyre is about to take that away from them knowingly, on purpose. Oh gosh. And then is pleased to not do it. I don't even have words. I can't. My Hufflepuff heart can't handle this. Keep going, Nicole.
Sensing her hesitation, Rhysand appears next to the throne with Amarantha and sends a message down their bond. Quote, "My hand tingled. Do it," the tingling said. I want to take a moment and pull out this mating parallel. Rhysand mentions that there are so many people that he killed for Amarantha that end the greater mission of, getting everyone out under the mountain, but he still thinks about those people constantly. These two Faes right here specifically, Fae-vorite is going to think about how she killed them for Amarantha, for the greater mission, but it will still haunt her bad every single night.
Rhys knows that she's capable of doing this, but he also appreciates how difficult it is because, like you said, he's been doing his own version of this for 50 years. Kill an innocent to live another day and have a chance at freedom. While she recognizes what she's doing is to save everyone, she is still beating herself up for being so selfish. She keeps coming back to the fact that killing these fairies are for her own future, for her own life, for her own love for Tamlin. She sees herself as the villain, and I don't think this is the right word, but it's like she's embracing that she's the villain here as well. Even if it is for the greater good, it's at the cost of her being the villain, and that's all she can really focus on. Again, even though she knows the bigger picture here. Going back to my live text as I was listening to this on the audiobook, after this happened, in all caps, I went, "No, you bitch, Feyre!"
I remember reading that and being like, that's not the reaction I had.
And then I went on to text still all in caps because I was going through the full experience. And I promise I've already posted a few of these on Instagram stories. I'll create like a carousel for this or something. All you had to do was say that you loved him when you had the chance. Because again, I've gone on my high horse about that too. See, I was really mad at her back then as well. It's carried through all these months. Who would have thought, by the way, all these months later, that I would be reading these text messages on our podcast about this book with thousands of people listening. And yeah, now it's our job. Not I.
Not I, said the cat. No way.
I probably would have spelled her name correctly if I knew that. If we didn't hate Amarantha already, but of course love how delicious of a villain she is, this scene right here would cement that hatred for her. She's positively delighting in this as she emotionally fucks with Feyre while making her kill these innocent fairies, knowing what's to come soon with Tamlin. "Oh, don't look so miserable, Feyre. Aren't you having fun? Ma'am, you are the only one having fun here, you and the Adder," and she knows it, taunting Feyre in only a way that Amarantha can.
Time to move on to door number 2, High Fae number 2. This female, instead of begging, is reciting a prayer. And yes, it's the same prayer that the lost member of the Blue Man group that Tamlin recited to him as he died. Also, that was another one of Amarantha's victims. Oh boy. But I find it so, maybe beautiful is not the right word, poetic, the contrast between these two victims here. The first one pleaded and begged. This fairy holds her chin up high and even nods to Feyre. She says, quote, "Let me enter eternity," she repeated, lifting her chin. "Fear no evil," she whispered, "just for me. Feel no pain." She's sending Feyre the message of, I see the bigger goal here. If my death brings about everyone's freedom, so be it. This is a very Feyre type person. I imagine that she would have had a very similar response to this fairy right here, with holding her head up high, even almost saying these words to her: fear no evil, feel no pain. She's saying those words for herself, yes, but almost to Feyre as well.
Yep.
Whereas Tamlin, who begged and pleaded earlier in this book at Rhysand's feet, is much more of the former, the first fairy's reaction. I mean, we don't really see him in that situation here, but he has been in that situation in the past. So it's just interesting the differences between these two fairies and how they react, and almost mirroring Tamlin and Feyre.
Yeah. Meanwhile, August 2023, Lexi in her text is still yelling, "Stop, Feyre, stop!"
I also need you to know that I'm like receiving these text messages and just howling with laughter, because what else do you do when you see your friend, your sister, reading these horrific book moments that you had to live alone, and they have someone, good for them, and you're just like, wow, feel my pain. I love you.
I love you too. Before the third fairy's hood is removed, Feyre looks up at Rhysand, and in this moment, Tamlin is supposedly sitting next to Amarantha. But Feyre is not looking at Tamlin. She's looking at Rhys for strength here. He's the one to give her strength and courage and urgency to go through with this. And she knows he's the one she has to rely on for that support right now. She wouldn't be able to bear looking at supposed Tamlin and not get any kind of reaction. Remember earlier, she said that his silence was killing her. In this moment, she is already planning to kill herself after this last fairy. She's focused on freeing everyone else, and the only way she can free herself at this point is to stab herself and escape this reality she's found herself in this tainted soul she can't keep living with. We will talk a lot about that here soon when she becomes Fae. Once again, she's been talking about herself in a negative light since the beginning of this book, and here she is really embracing the villain in her and only looking at herself in that light.
Well, it's about to get worse because she stabs that fairy, and next up, the guard removes the hood, and it is none other than Timmy Tam. Feyre's like, who the heck is the person on the throne then? And it was the adder, quote, tricked, deceived by my own senses again. I love that she brings up this Alice reminder right before she uses said Alice reminder to crack the Heart of Stone code. We get a line about Rhysand's face going pale. And at first read, I was like, oh my God, is this shock? But I wonder if this is actually worry and fear that Feyre won't be able to complete this task, meaning everything he did for and worked for is foiled.
I have to wonder what his reaction here is too, because it does seem like he's going, oh, fuck, Amarantha pulled a fast one.
Yeah.
When he knows her better than most, unfortunately. And while I don't think he knew this specifically was coming, he probably had an idea of the twisted fuckery she was about to pull. But I do agree with you, because his face goes pale after Feyre says this isn't fair. And he's like, uh-oh,
yeah.
Uh-oh.
I think he's also worried, oh my God, she doesn't know. Oh no, she doesn't know. Like, she doesn't know that the Hearts of Stone is a thing. Like, I think it's truly the, oh my God, she's
about to kill herself.
She's about to kill herself. She's not going to go through with it.
Yeah.
This all comes down to, quote, kill him and save his court and my life, or kill myself and let them all live as Amarantha's slaves. Let her and the King of Hybern wage their final war against the human realm. Like you mentioned earlier, that train question, that if do you save one person, do you save 10 people? This is that exactly. Again, brilliant villain stuff. But Feyre, our brilliant fucking woman, is not done. Feyre knows that there's a part of the curse that Alice has been unable to tell her, and she figures out that it was no accident that she overheard the adder in the garden in the spring court. Tamlin had led the adder over to where she was glamored. And then the adder said, quote, though you have a heart of stone, Tamlin, you certainly keep a host of fear inside it. And also, the door was open the day she overheard Lucien and him fighting about the curse, wanting her to eavesdrop because the door was open. Lucien said, quote, for someone with a heart of stone, yours is certainly soft these days. But then she thinks back to what the adder said in the hall with the pig creature last episode, and how he said, quote, my lady makes no bargains that are not advantageous to her. She knows that Amarantha would never kill off Tamlin, the person she desired most.
So she makes sure it's impossible to kill Tamlin in this way. Again, I have to wonder if Amarantha had this plot in mind before Feyre arrived under the mountain. Like, how far out did she anticipate this if Alice still couldn't say anything about this part of the curse? Or was this a convenient thing to throw in after Feyre declared her love and entered the 3 trials? I'm thinking it's the latter, but you have to wonder.
As Feyre's doing all of this, you know that meme with the woman and the calculus behind her? I don't know if it's calculus, but the math behind her. And she's like, As Feyre is that meme, she begins, quote, turning over words like stones. Again, that stone language coming into play as she figures out his heart is made of stone, at least due to a curse from Amarantha.
Which, by the way, we do get an answer in the mix here about why Feyre thinks Tamlin's heart was turned to stone, which I know I've speculated and wondered about in past episodes. And so here we actually do get the answer. I had not read far enough and I did not remember this part here. The High Lords having hearts of stone was how Amarantha controlled them and their magic, which, if this is true, and Feyre is correct in her thinking of this, means that Tamlin's heart of stone was already there before this curse was placed on him when his powers were taken by Amarantha. Remember, before his powers were taken first. And then a little while later is when the curse was placed on him in the Spring Court. So wanted to just pull that out as we hone in here on the Hearts of Stone, that it is not just Tamlin, it is all of the High Lords, because that is how she took their power and contained it.
I want to first off say brava to our girl Fae-vorite for figuring this out. I never would have been able to do that in this moment.
I don't have the memory to actually pull up these kind of conversations. Like, I am one of those people where I forget the conversations that I have way too often.
I also think like Fae-vorite's in a big high pressure situation in this moment. How is she like, okay, let me just go through my file effects and like see, look at my previous memories. Like I would never, like you'd be so panicked. I don't know how you would have the mental capacity for that. I can also so easily picture Tamlin watching Fae-vorite have this like, meme woman with all the math happening behind her moment and just being like, come on, you can do you got it. You can do it. Like, because he's just like completely vacant, basically. He doesn't really give her a whole lot until she like looks at him and he's like, yes, you got it. But I imagine what is going through his brain.
Well, and then like you kind of just mentioned there, the way that Tamlin realizes when she's figured it out and he lifts his chin up and has a faint smile on his lips. He's ready for this. It's like, all right, let's go. Good job for giving your girl the confidence she needed in this moment. I will give him that.
In this moment's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
In this moment specifically, he gave her the metaphorical 2 thumbs up.
He's like, go ahead, stab me. You got this. As Fae-vorite reaches for her dagger and steps in front of him, she thinks about how it was fate that brought here and how there is such a thing as fate. Remember, it was not that long ago when not only fate, but hope also was something that Fae-vorite didn't believe in. She told Alice, quote, I don't believe in fate and I don't believe in some ridiculous cauldron.
Fate brought Fae-vorite here to this moment. It guided Andrus and her to cross paths. It brought her into Prythian to break this spell and play a much larger role. She's not even thinking in this moment that it was Tamlin who did all of this to get her to this place, but it was actually fate. She's handing herself over to fate. I have so many more thoughts on the bigger role of fate in this story, and I can't wait to get to them another day. Now's not the right time. But again, just like how it really is all coming together in this way here.
So with an I love you, she stabs him. Not a sentence I thought I would ever say.
And what do you know? There's a faint thud, the most beautiful sound written on a page. Because yes, this means that Fae-vorite's trust in herself and in Tamlin was correct. Huzzah! 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 I say that about a character who I've been on the record wishing dies later in the series, but we aren't there yet. Everyone in ACOTAR, whether they're under the mountain or in Valaris, has impeccable style. And I don't know about you, Nicole, but have you ever gone to the store ready to refresh your wardrobe only to walk out of that store empty-handed because everything just feels so dang expensive? Yes. Well, what if you could upgrade your wardrobe with luxury essentials at unbeatable prices? Quince is here to transform the way you shop with a range of high-quality items priced within reach.
I'm obsessed with the luxurious closet fantasy, even though it's actually happening in reality. The shirt I'm wearing right now today is actually from Quince. Thank you so much. With Quince, you can feel like you're shopping at a luxury store without the luxury prices. With items like 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters for $50. Yes, you heard that right. Organic cotton sweaters, washable silk tops like the one I'm wearing right now, and timeless 14-karat gold jewelry.
I just got new leggings and they're the softest things ever. And I spent less on those than I have for any other leggings. And trust me, I am willing to spend money on leggings. Yes, and I'm just so happy. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us customers. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. I love that so much. That is so important to us.
Indulge in affordable luxury. Go to quince.com/FFG for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/FFG to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/FFG. Thank you, Quince. Then a lot happens all at once. Fae-vorite pulls the blade out of Tamlin's chest to notice that the tip has been nicked. And while Tamlin's wound is healing, it's healing much, much more slowly than it should, and the mask still doesn't come off. This is our show don't tell of, oh no, the curse is not broken, even though she completed all 3 tasks. And that's when we get the big old fuck woo moment from Amarantha. Neither Amarantha nor Feyre ever mentioned when the Spring Court would be freed.
I will say, I'm surprised Rhys didn't see this coming.
Thank you. Same.
or that he and Feyre discussed maybe this possibility. I don't know, maybe he wasn't able to, but you would think this would come up. Like right after she stabbed at Tamlin, Rhys was grinning from ear to ear thinking, let's fucking go! And it's like this didn't cross his mind. Like he knows her better than anyone.
But as Amarantha walks towards Feyre, she starts to beat her. Her fingers turn into claws and her teeth turn sharp. So she is the self-proclaimed High Queen of these lands. Because of that, is this her beast form or beast form light coming into play? I didn't think she had one, but this is making me think otherwise. Is this shape-shifting? What is this?
I don't think it's any of that. It is kind of vague just how the High Lord's powers work with the beast forms and all of that. So I am making some big assumptions right here. She can't use the High Lord's power because she isn't one. So my guess here is that she's just using her extra evil bitch lurking underneath her, aka, one of her deadly powers. She is definitely very powerful, even if she's not nearly as powerful as one of the High Lords. But this dark power within her is very different from having a beast form, which is specific to the High Lords. Again, it's pretty confusing with all the nuances. So I'm going to guess no, this does not have to do with the High Lords and their powers and their beast form, but this is her just being an evil bitch.
Evil bitch indeed. But then she starts talking only in italics. Lexi, here I go again. I'm so excited. She says the following sentences in italics. Quote, "You, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to make you pay for your insolence." And then she goes back to speaking in non-italics. I think that this is almost her, I'm going to call it, for lack of a better term, casting a spell towards Feyre, directing her magic through her words. You, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to make you pay. Because her next sentence that's not in italics is, quote, "Admit that you don't really love him and I'll spare you." I think that this is not in italics because no matter what, she was going to kill Feyre. So this isn't her casting a curse or anything on her. It is her just being a evil bitch.
Oh, I like that. And also when she's not speaking in italics, it's not directly part of the torturing that she's inflicting. So when she is speaking in italics, it's how she's torturing Feyre. When she's not speaking in italics, it's her essentially saying, you can stop this. You can stop what I'm doing to you. Ooh, that's interesting. You and your italics, Nicole. I always love it.
I mean, I did immediately write after this in the outline, I could be wildly overthinking this and Amarantha could just be speaking with, vigor.
Right. That is also very, very possible, yes.
Well, because right after Rhys screams, Feyre! And yes, that is in italics. More on that in a moment. But in my headcanon, it is her casting a spell, and I'm sticking to it. I gotta have the italics mean something. I also want to take just a minute to say a big old F you to Amarantha. She is magically picking Feyre off the ground and thrashing her to the floor. Then when Feyre finally passes out from the pain, Amarantha brings her back, quote, "ensuring that I felt everything." What a bitch.
Bellatrix Lestrange and Amarantha would be best friends.
That's horrifying.
This is her... I know. This is Amarantha going, Crucio, 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 over and over again to Feyre. She's casting the Crucio spell on her. Amarantha was just bested by a human who, again, she did not think would win this even with her Heart of Stone safeguard in place. And she is now in full psycho mode. She is obsessed with this human, proving that she doesn't love Tamlin. She's on a mission to show that this human doesn't deserve a High Lord. Her High Lord. She even calls Feyre inconsistent, drawing upon what she's seen of her and Rhys. And I'm just gotta say, she's not wrong. I realize context is super key, but I'm just saying.
Are you really defending Amarantha right now?
No, I'm just saying that she's not saying the completely incorrect things.
Hot take, Lexi. This is a hot take.
One of Feyre's biggest struggles after Under the Mountain will be feeling like she isn't worthy of Tamlin. We've already talked about this and we'll continue to talk about her feelings of no self-worth, and Amarantha is putting it on full display here, saying exactly what will end up haunting Feyre. Still, she's even calling Feyre a filthy pig, similar language as Nesta said to Feyre way back when in chapter 2 when they were living in the cabin. quote, your mortal heart is nothing to us. I love how she mentions Feyre's mortal heart when it'll be the topic of conversation between her and Rhys very soon. Speaking of our High Lord of the Night Court, he's the only one doing anything here.
He's the one calling for Feyre, quote, like he cared. He's the one who ran to Tamlin's bleeding body, not to help him, but to pick up the ash dagger to run then to kill Amarantha. Unfortunately, very much unfortunately, that attempt and everyone after that is in vain.
At least he tried.
Oh, absolutely.
He tried. Yes, he tried to fight. Now, we do have to consider, was Tamlin physically able to stand up to Amarantha? No, he wasn't. But it's not until she has been torturing Feyre and she's literally on death's door that he begs Amarantha. Doesn't try to fight, just begs, which is very on brand for him, I just gotta say.
Extremely on brand for Tim and Tam. Without Amarantha even needing to look at him, she throws Rhys back against the marble wall. I hate this because obviously don't love it for obvious reasons, but I love that like he's running at her and she is so powerful that she doesn't even have to look at him to throw him to the ground. But then of course she turns her attention on him and beats him to a pulp. Now, like many moments under the mountain, we have to pull out Rhys's point of view, which we will later learn in chapter 54. And I'm quoting the whole damn thing, Lexi, because it's too good.
I have not said anything for several books now. I understand that when we quote, it is very important. The context here is when Nicole would do big quotes back when we were doing our Fourth Wing episodes, I would go back in and be like, no, we can't just quote the whole book here, Nicole.
To be fair, those were like 16-page outlines, and I guarantee you at least 8 of those pages were just my quotes, so it's extremely fair of you. Quote, when she started torturing you, something snapped in a way I couldn't explain. Only that seeing you bleeding and screaming undid me. It broke me at last. And I knew as I picked up that knife to kill her, I knew right then what you were. I knew you were my mate, and you were in love with another male. And I
feel like so tearing up. I just got chills all over my body.
I knew that you were in love with another male and had destroyed yourself to save him, and that I didn't care. That you were going to die and I was going to die with you. I couldn't stop thinking it over and over as you screamed as I tried to kill her. You were my mate, my mate, my mate.
Who else is crying? Because I'm crying.
These numerous attempts by Rhys and the you were my mate, my mate, my mate being the force that aided him to get up again and again and again. Eventually, she throws him back so hard that his head cracks against the stone and the red marble even spider webs towards Feyre. I love that little subtlety connecting these two, how even in his head thrashing back, the spider web cracked marble was reaching for her. And finally, Feyre begs her Amarantha to stop. And when their eyes connect, her vision flashes between her and Rhys's body. Every moment of this mating bond is being foreshadowed here right on these pages.
When Feyre starts trying to protect Rhys, begging Amarantha to stop hurting him, that is when her inner monologue begins calling him Rhys. And right after she starts thinking of him as Rhys and trying to help him and their eyes lock together, quote, the bond between us went taut. This is moments after Rhysand realized with clarity that they were mates. Like literally, it's like he realized it as she was being tortured, and then he tried to kill Amarantha, and then that is when Feyre starts trying to stop her. That is when the bond goes taut, and then that's when she kind of mentally starts thinking of him as a different kind of person. And not to mention, this is also when she starts going into his mind, seeing things play out from his perspective. Like Nicole said, the foreshadowing is all over these pages. Oh my God. And now back in her own mind, Feyre refuses to give up her love for Tamlin and say what Amarantha wants her to, that she doesn't love him. Feyre has given up everything else. She's literally sacrificed her humanity for this love, that if she gives it up, everything will have been for naught. So yes, it's all she has left, and she's holding on to it to take it with her to her death, to take her love with her to her death, because again, that's what she thinks she deserves. She's not afraid of death in this moment. Meanwhile, Tamlin is saying, please, I'll do anything. Tamlin, do something, anything. He's not willing to fight for Feyre in this moment. He doesn't even consider fighting. I'm very specifically using the words fighting, not necessarily doing anything besides beg, but fighting for her, fighting Amarantha because if he does not have his power, which he doesn't right now, he is nothing without it. And he knows that. He only thinks of himself as worthy, as being able to be that protector, as being able to be that fighter and that warrior with his power. In his head, he can't be her protector, and he's not even trying to be. Again, yes, I acknowledge that he is injured, which was actually very clever of Amarantha to set up that if Feyre did indeed stab him, he wouldn't have the energy to fight against her. I don't know, just pleading, not even trying to fight back because he's given up, because he's hopeless without his power. It is a tough look, especially compared to Rhys, who was just willing to sacrifice himself to even have any attempt at just to try. All the while, Feyre is actively valuing Tamlin more than she values herself. And he hasn't shown that he values her since they've been under the mountain. Yes, he's had his own strategy, but he lost, like I said, any ground he could stand on with that after he put them both at risk, wanting a quickie when he should have not put her in that kind of danger, or he should have just tried to help her get to safety.
Feyre is literally on death's door as she starts to think about the riddle. Brilliant fucking woman moment number 2. Let's walk through how she figured this out. Again, this is another thing that I would never have figured out in the moment. I would have been just like, take me away. I would have been. She's thinking about how she would never abide by Amarantha's command and say that she doesn't love him, even if it breaks her, even if it kills her, like Lexi was just saying. And then she thinks, quote, "For though each of my strikes land a powerful blow, when I kill, I do it slow." Her last few months under the mountain were just this, a slow, horrific death. And what is the cause of this? Her love for Tamlin.
The language of, quote, "there is no cure for this," is like, oof, that's not what should be described for a happily ever after, is it?
The next line she thinks of is, quote, "But scorned, I become a difficult beast to defeat." Tamlin rejected Amarantha's love, possibly a mating bond like we've discussed. And in this line, Amarantha is the difficult beast to defeat because she was scorned of Tamlin's love. I love that she threw in a little flex, like, I'm a difficult beast to defeat in her own fucking riddle. Like, I love that she did that. It's very on brand for Amarantha. Then the next line she thinks of, quote, "But I bless all of those who are brave enough to dare." Brave enough indeed. Feyre has been running from the vulnerability and the hope that comes with love most of her life. She didn't just run from her feelings for Tamlin, but also her family, and more specifically, her sisters. Now, with all of these 3 conclusions drawn, she answers the riddle. But this is actually only it's less than half of the riddle. The rest was left out. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it in its entirety. Quote, "There are those who seek me for a lifetime, but we never meet. And those I kiss, but who trample me beneath ungrateful feet. At times I seem to favor the clever and the fair, but I bless those who are brave enough to dare. By large, my ministrations are soft-handed and sweet, but scorned, I become a difficult beast to defeat. For though each of my strikes lands a powerful blow, when I kill, I do it slow." Yep, love does indeed check out for each of these. But you know what else checks out in this moment? Feyre's life force, because she answers the riddle, which equals instantaneous freedom. Remember, unlike their 3 trials bargain. And upon answering the riddle, Amarantha breaks her neck. Quick side note, I love that it's stated, "I gaze at Tamlin's masked face one last time." This is right before she dies, and indeed, this will be the last time she sees his face masked again, because right after she wakes up, all high fae and such, he does take off his mask, and she looks at him completely mask-free when the curse is broken. So Feyre's dead. And no good transition there. Before we walk through Feyre's resurrection, we must discuss the eyes that she sees through Rhysand's. It is gathered on the first read that this is because of their bargain and their bond that they created between them under the mountain. But like many things, we get the full scope in chapter 54. Quote, "And I felt you die, and this beautiful, wonderful thing that had come into my life, this gift from the cauldron, it was gone. In my desperation, I clung to that bond, not to the bargain. The bargain was nothing. The bargain was like a cobweb. But I grabbed the bond between us and I tugged, and I willed you to hold on." This is their mating bond between them that he really literally just realized the true meaning of not moments before.
And then he goes on to describe wrapping his power around the bond, the mating bond, and he could feel Feyre flickering there, holding on, to which she realizes much later on, in chapter 54, quote, "Home had been at the end of the bond, I'd told the bone carver. Not Tamlin, not the spring court, but Rhysand.
I can't wait to talk about the bone carver scene because there's so much there. Tamlin does exactly as Puppet Master Rhysand thought he would and goes full-blown man, bear, pig, tantrum, shouts to you, official Stephen Walker, on Amarantha's ass. The chapter opens with Amarantha's face slackening as she realizes that Feyre is dead. I think that this is either her realizing A, the spell is broken and oh crap, this is about to get bad, or B, because of that, she is about to lose control over everything and die.
I think it is both of those. It's
so
point
too.
A and then it goes into point B. Yeah.
Which she does exactly that. She starts begging Tamlin to spare her. You can see last episode this as to why this might be hinting as for a Tamlin Amarantha mating bond.
Theorized mating bond aside, it could also be her first instinct because she is ultimately a schemer, not all powerful like the High Lords. She beat them because she outsmarted them, not because she was inherently more powerful. And she can't outsmart Tamlin right here. So she is stripped of her strongest asset and in the most vulnerable position she's ever been in. So all she's left with is asking for mercy, showing that as much as we've been saying she's a brilliant villain, she is ultimately nothing when it really comes down to it. Yes, she has her own power, but she knows what's about to happen right here. And even though she'll soon fight back, like I said, with her own dark magic, this is the end and she knows it and she is terrified of death. Most villains are. They don't want to face death. They are trying to avoid death at all costs. And that is her being a classic villain right here.
Looking at you, Voldemort. Ooh, Voldemort. But Lexi, guess who's back?
Man Bear Pig!
Man Bear Pig is back! Using a sword that Lucian throws his way, he embeds that sword through Amarantha's head onto a wall and then tears her throat out. I'm not laughing. I'm laughing.
Wait, we got to give a big old huzzah, huzzah, huzzah!
And I gotta just say, when Tamlin finally acts, he really goes big or goes home.
He really had to make sure Amarantha was dead. And, killing her with a sword was not satisfying enough. Tamlin, who really is, I'll say, in touch with his beast side, he needed to rip her apart with his jaws. He needed to feel that blood. He needed to make sure she was dead, dead, dead.
Are you in touch with your beast side right now? I also want to point out that after he literally rips her throat out, he goes over to Feyre and starts sobbing onto her and he kisses her. And if I was Feyre's dead body, I'd be like, sir, you have blood of my enemy all over your mouth.
No, because remember when he changed, it was all cleaned up.
Oh, you're right. Thank God. That really would bother me otherwise.
There's a moment where Feyre is watching Tamlin sob over her dead body, and she thinks how she wants to beg for his forgiveness for what she'd done for the other bodies on the floor. I'm bringing back my power dynamic talk here, because even when she had an ash dagger to him, even when it was up to her to break the Springcourt curse, she still feels inferior to him. Why? Because that's been their entire relationship. And yes, I realize that I have gone on and on and on about how he put her before his entire court. So besides that one part, I fully acknowledge I am not being consistent with my issues. I'm just expressing how I feel as I read each moment. Feyre just freed everyone. Amarantha is now dead, but all she can do is focus on these other bodies and how she's so sorry, specifically to Tamlin.
I'm so pissed. The High Lords then come up to Feyre. I find it very interesting that Baron, the High Lord of Autumn, is the first to approach. Rhysand admits in chapter 54 that he spoke mind to mind with each of the High Lords, convincing them to step forward. But Baron was first in line, especially how in ACOTAR it's speculated that Baron will only most likely fight on the Prythian side if he knows that everyone else will too. I just find that interesting.
I thought so as well, and so I've parsed through it a little bit. Rhys says in chapter 54 that when he convinced each of them to come forward, none of them disagreed because he thinks that they were too stunned to think of saying no. But he also said in that same chapter 54 that if he had to, he wouldn't care if he had to slice into all of their minds to do this. He'd make the High Lords save Feyre, and he's holding on to the bond with that sliver of hope that if all of them can be free, this is also moments before Tamlin kills Amarantha, they can save Feyre. So all of this to say, my guess is that he spoke first to Baron because he's the least likely to say yes. So Rhys went with the hardest to convince first, which made it easier to convince the others since it's kind of like, oh shit, Baron's doing this? I guess I'll do it too. But also, Rhys would have forced them all if they didn't agree. So
yeah, he would have. That is mind control that I'm okay with. Also here, it's mentioned how Baron's face looks like Lucian. Because this kind of was like, wait, what? My best guess here is that A, Baron not being his true father was decided on later by SJM, or B, it is mentioned in Akamath, quote, the Illyrians looked similar, but only in the way that people who came from the same place did. So it could be a similar thing here. I don't really have an answer to that. I just wanted to call that out. But after Baron is Tarquin and Cleus, High Lord of Summer and Winter, then Dawn and Day, and then last, of course, Rhys. I also love that it goes in the order of how Prythian goes up.
Yeah, it is, because it's first autumn and then
summer.
Yeah, first autumn and then summer, and then it goes winter, then Dawn, Day, Rhys, and then it goes back down to Tamlin. Yeah.
I love that it's described as, quote, Rhysand stepped forward, bringing my shred of soul with him, and I found Tamlin staring at me, at us. Us carries so much weight here, especially knowing the mating bond between these two. But Rhys, mentions how this gift from the High Lords has been bestowed upon very few. What? I want to know the backstory of this. Who else got this? What happened to them? How did they die? What caused them to be brought back to life?
I want to know this too. Like, wait, it's been bestowed upon very few. Who else has this happened to?
Right? And now as everyone under the mountain emerges, they're going to need to celebrate those little wins of getting back into the everyday life. For me, those little victories look like, getting a really large part of the outline done. I'm looking at you, chapter 43. Or when my husband and I stick to our budget, we celebrate those wins as well. And when you find new ways to save, you can reach your financial goals easier and still have the occasional treat, like your next book on your TBR, perhaps. With a Chime checking account, you can get features like fee-free overdraft up to $200 with SpotMe, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit.
So many of us have been there, where you're living life with just pennies to your bank account. And inevitably, you forgot to turn off autopay for that one subscription you don't use anymore, and boom, overdraft fees. When you set up direct deposit into your Chime account after a qualifying direct deposit of $200 or more, Chime will notify you to enroll in SpotMe. With an activated debit card, Chime will spot you up to your limit when you exceed your balance. Then your next direct deposit is applied to your negative balance. Chime never charges fees or interest for using SpotMe.
I also love that Chime is built around community. With Chime, you and your friends can give each other complimentary boosts to each other's SpotMe limits. And best of all, Chime comes with no monthly maintenance fees. We can get a huzzah for that.
Take more control of your finances and say goodbye to monthly fees. Open your account in minutes at chime.com/fantasy fangirl. That's Chime, CHIME.com/fantasy fangirl. Chime feels like progress.
Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. members FDIC. SpotMe eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Boosts are available to eligible Chime members enrolled in SpotMe and are subject to monthly limits. Terms and conditions apply. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details.
The description of her coming back to the world is so good. She's coming back to where Tamlin is waiting, where life is waiting. Remember all that she's gone through recently, breaking and knowing she'll die, then feeling her strength again from the music in her cell, and remembering she is fighting for life and beauty and love.
And also to call out that moment with the bone carver again. Quote, I followed that bond back to me. I knew that home was on the other end of it. Home was not Tamlin. Home was Rhys.
And immediately when she opens her eyes, Feyre notices how intricate the crystals are in the chandelier. The first signs of her improved and sharpened eyesight now as Fae. The moment she realizes she truly is alive, she doesn't celebrate or feel happy. No, her mind goes straight to the two Fae that she killed. We've already talked about this a lot, but here it is on full display. She can't even complete her sentences in her own narrative. She's so distraught. She'll soon reflect she wishes her human heart had changed too, where she doesn't feel this terrible shame and heaviness and self-loathing for what she did. This is her human heart at work here, despite her Fae senses showing everything else is different. Plus, she's about to feel like being a Fae with a practically immortal life is actually a punishment, now that she'll be trapped and have to live with what she did for eternity. Remember, she wanted to die before. She planned on dying if that last person wasn't Tamlin. And now she's stuck being alive forever and having to live with what she did.
I love how the Fae senses are described with the hush of the gasps of the crowd echoing off the crystals of the chandelier. This is something we human mortals would never think about, ever. And honestly, I'm shocked her first thought isn't, oh my God, what smells so horrible? Because, yep, you guessed it, Claire's better body is still hanging up, and now there's a new corpse to add to it. Someone clean up Claire.
Nicole.
Someone clean up Claire, please.
Feyre sees Tamlin in all his unmasked glory. And let's give another huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Yes, I'm giving them a huzzah because they don't have very many happy moments left. And they've been through a lot, okay? Plus, she can hear his heart. So yay, no more heart of stone. That fixes everything, right? Wrong. Because after she takes in his face, looking upon it for the very first time like she's been on Love is Blind.
You're wrong was so scary. She also describes Tamlin's face exactly how she thought it looked when he asked her, what do you think I look like? In the Glen way back when. So way to go, Feyre, I guess. Way to go, Feyre.
Her mind once again goes back to what she did to get to this moment. She can't think about it right now, but knows she'll have to force herself to face it someday. It won't be until Valaris that she actually does face it, surrounded by loved ones who understand her pain and support her through it. Unlike you, Tamlin, who will pretend to be asleep when she's throwing up from her nightmares. Again, I've been reading ACOMAF and I'm very angry at Tamlin right now. But in all seriousness, Tamlin now represents the shame and guilt of everything that Feyre has been put through. He is the living embodiment reminder of her tainted soul because he is the reason she has a tainted soul in the first place. Once again, we have to pull Rhys's perspective from chapter 54 here, how he, again, had to watch as Tamlin held and kissed the woman he loved. Rhys wanted to go home. He wanted to go back to Valaris, but he had to stay and make sure things were set in motion and that Feyre was all right. Fast forward a few chaotic hours later, where we learn the Adder and a few nastier fairies had disappeared instantly after Amarantha died, which we will later learn the Adder took Jurian's eye and bone back to the King of Hybern. Also, Lucian's brothers are gone because apparently some other fairies are pissed off at them too. Some fairies left, others celebrated, and others were simply just there in shock. I honestly probably would have been among the latter. I just would have been like, oh, like just like frozen.
I feel like I would have either sprung into action or sat facing a wall in the fetal position, and there is no in between. That is the two
there
reactions
really isn't for you. Nope. And then the High Fae and fairies of the Spring Court thanked Tamlin and are thanking Feyre.
When I first was reading this for the deep dive, I was like, they were, they're kneeling, they're embracing, they're kissing Tamlin. I was going off for a moment, and then I remembered that he did kill Amarantha. So even though it was just—
Can't forget that.
Yeah, we can't forget that. Even though he was just the puppet behind all the masterminding that the other people who actually did something did. But he doesn't know that. But Feyre thinks almost as like an afterthought how they're thanking her too. She says, quote, thanking me. And the me is even in italics, almost like she can't even believe that they're thanking her because she just murdered 2 innocent fairies. But of course they're thanking her. She is going to go down in history now as Feyre Cursebreaker after this.
Shout to my shirt.
Yes, shout to your shirt.
I'm wearing my Feyre Cursebreaker shirt from Sparrow and Wild, and I'm absolutely obsessed with it. And I was so excited to wear it for today's episode.
It was such an on-brand choice for today. I didn't even think about that. That's so good.
I know.
She saved everyone in Prythian. Feyre saved everyone in Prythian, but right now she is so lost in her own darkness and despair that she can't even see that the gratitude is genuine.
There was also quick, tense meetings with the High Lords Tamlin was allied with to sort out next steps. Quick pause. Which courts would these be that he is allied with? I'm going to assume Tarquin. He's also a new High Lord, so he and Tamlin don't know each other well, but Summer Court and Spring Court are neighbors and have been friendly with each other. I would say maybe Winter Court, since Lucian had contacts there earlier in the book. Dawn and Day Courts, perhaps. They're pretty neutral. All I know is definitely not the Night Court, because also Rhys is nowhere to be seen, or the Autumn Court for obvious reasons. But finally, Feyre is with Tamlin in a quiet room. Thank goodness, because, and I quote, Tamlin at last noticed my dull eyes, my silence.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
All right, stepping up on a high horse here, because we do need to talk about this for a few moments. In the aftermath of Amarantha's death, Tamlin was focusing on everyone else and bringing Feyre along without immediate care or concern for what she had just endured. Now, I will give him this. Are there a lot of moving parts right now? Absolutely. But he was, and I'll still say is, oblivious to her suffering, oblivious to what is paining her, because he cannot relate to her emotionally. He even says, "How can I repay you?" when repayment is the last thing she would ever want to be associated with. And again, he should know that as her person. While among the other fairies and even the High Lords, Feyre's presence was a symbol of power and triumph. She's a political piece that Tamlin is using to his advantage, even if it is subconscious. I'm not saying he is manipulating her on purpose here, but this is happening. Now that she's completed her part in all of this, it's like, okay, honey, you're done. Thanks for your help. The big, powerful High Lords have got everything under control from here on out. Okay, thanks, bye. This is how she is useful, by bringing these different courts together and back into their power. Tamlin is very quickly getting caught up in his power, and that's going to be his own downfall.
I'm disgusted right now. I have nothing else to add to this except for just bleh, bleh, Tamlin, bad.
And the quietness makes the truth of what she did so loud in her head. Again, it's priming us for how screwed she's about to be in the spring court with nothing truly worthwhile to focus her attention on.
I love that she's even surprised every time she looks at Tamlin's unmasked face. It's almost like, oh, it's like, who are you? It's not consciously there. It's that show don't tell of, do I even know you on the page? This is the point of no return for these two. Tamlin isn't a stranger per se, but it will never be the same again, no matter how hard these two try to pretend like they're back into the early days of this book. There is something forever changed with them. You know that moment in a relationship where something happens? It doesn't have to be something like super high and traumatic, but just like something bad, just something not great happens, and you like try for a few months or whatever, and then you're like, nope, this isn't working.
Yep. Yep, exactly. You fundamentally think of them differently as a person. And Feyre is thinking how she should be more cheerful for Tamlin, but she just can't be. Poor Feyre was just turned high fae against her will when she did not necessarily want to live after what she did to those high fae, and now she's grappling with the fact that now everything is better, but she's the one who paid the terrible price along with those two other fairies. She's like, does anybody care about them right now? I wouldn't feel like celebrating either, girl.
I also despise with a fiery passion the for him. I should be more cheerful for Tamlin. Ugh, gross. It's as if she doesn't feel like she's even allowed to be sad because it's not what Tamlin wants. Where is my red flag guy? Dustin Pointer, I need you.
This is going to be all that we're talking about in the next episode when she's back in the spring court before the wedding and all of this. Everything is for Tamlin. I should be feeling better for Tamlin's sake. I should be doing this for Tamlin. Ooh, we're getting worked up here. All right. But Tamlin doesn't understand she's feeling all of these feelings because, of course he doesn't. And now, because there's no good transition, let's go for it, Nicole. Bang, 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 bang.
Bang. I said a bang, bang, bangity bang.
This is like the worst bangity bang ever.
We've never had
the only
bad
one that's going to be worse
bang.
is the only one worse than this is going to be the ACOTAR in the tent.
Oh,
one.
God. At least it's with Reese and not Tamlin.
Yes, exactly. There really is no good transition from talking about murder and life changes and Tamlin not understanding her, but that's kind of the point here.
Yeah.
Feyre needs to feel what she sacrificed her soul for. She has a gaping hole in her chest and needs to feel that lustful burn go through it, distract her from the darkness she is spiraling down into. Starting now, she's going to continually use their sexy time as a coping mechanism. And in this moment, she's wild and fierce because she doesn't think she deserves gentle or loving.
I know that this is not the same thing, but it feels very reminiscent of like breakup sex, right? Where you have this huge hole in your heart, but you need something to fill it. I don't mean that in a sexual innuendo way. I mean that in like you need some kind of connection to fill it. And I mean, I think it's supposed to feel that way. This is supposed to feel kind of like why are you wait, hold on. Like Like
it's not the reunion that we expected.
No.
Or exactly. And we're definitely going to get a lot more of this in the next book, where Feyre is using sex as a way to connect with Tamlin and temporarily offer feeling and fulfillment in her darkness. But okay, now enough about their sex life, because something is... I think
that's the shortest they've ever covered a sex scene ever on this podcast.
I think that's the least amount you've ever said about it.
It's because there's nothing to say here that makes me feel good or to add to this. It's just...
There's no sheathing.
Can't do 10 minutes on the word sheathing in this episode.
Something is tugging at her middle.
I cannot believe I'm saying this, but thank God, because I'd way rather talk about this.
Feyre describes this as a thread deep inside. Yes, yes, yes to the mating bond. Remember that Rhys will say later, that kind of mentioned earlier here, that he waited as long as he could before going back to Valaris. Apparently, he was very considerate and let our two lovebirds bang it out before he sent this tug down the pond.
And he probably knew what they were doing, too, because he probably felt it.
Yes.
Oh.
It's like, all right, I'll let them wrap up and then I'll say my goodbye. What a trooper he is here.
So sad.
It is so fitting that these two have this heartfelt conversation above ground. I love that for them, because they desperately needed to get out from under the mountain to share this vulnerability as they begin their journey of putting this horror behind them and healing from it. Rhys was nowhere to be seen in the throne room after he helped bring Feyre back. And I'm willing to bet he came up here to see the sunlight and bask in his freedom and honestly just process everything that just happened, while still, staying close to his girl so that their bond is strong and he can make sure she's okay, finding the right moment once they're done bangity bangs to say goodbye for now.
I think it's also so appropriate that it is the antithesis to her cell. All of their other conversations, I'm going to ignore the ones in like the throne room, because those weren't really conversations, because Feyre was drugged. So all their conversations in the cell were in this like dark, gloomy cage. She's now on a mountaintop with him. It could not be more polar opposite. I love that for them.
And speaking of polar opposites, Nicole, earlier in the episode, you used the words about Tamlin keeping her in the dark and Rhys was like the light. And I really want to hone in on that here. Tamlin keeps her in the dark, literally staying under the mountain after all of this instead of immediately going back to the spring court. No, they went to a different wing under the mountain. And metaphorically, he is still keeping her in the dark by not telling her things. Ironically, Rhys is the one here who represents light. He has Feyre come out from under the mountain for the first time. He shares information with her in a way no one else does, giving her the opportunity to also be vulnerable with him in a way she never does with Tamlin.
It's also the embodiment of their freedom. It's showing it right here on their page. Like, again, they are on a mountaintop. This is just one of the most maybe this is the Colorado in me showing, but like that is one of the most beautifully freeing moments. You feel powerful. You feel like unstoppable, seeing the like whole sky in front of you. And while they don't feel that way right now, this is we're out. This is the symbolism of we're free. We're out. We've made it. And I love that Rhys brought her there to show her that subconsciously or consciously. I don't know.
In chapter 54, Rhys will say, quote, "I almost told you then, but you were so sad and tired. And for once you looked at me like I was worth something."
Worth something carries so much weight as we learn more about Rhysand next book and how he does not feel worthy of a happy ending. These Illyrian boys, and they're not feeling worthy. It breaks my freaking heart. And I miss the bad boys. I can't wait to get to them.
It's okay, Cassian. I'll put you back together again. I promise.
I love how neither of us are like, Azriel, you've got it. You're fine.
Got plenty of women on him. I am a Cassian girl through and through.
Silver Flames will be fun.
And as we're talking about our Illyrian bat boys, we also have to note that he has his Illyrian wings out during this scene. Feyre notes that his talons aren't anywhere to be seen. Yeah, girl, because he's not in his beast form, but rather his Illyrian form. There's a big difference between the two of them. Then she goes on to ask Rhys why, implying, "Why did you try to save me and kill Amarantha?" And even though she doesn't say that full sentence, she only says why, he knows exactly what she means, because of course he does. He answers, quote, "I want my future offspring to know that I," italics, was there and that I fought against her in the end, even if I couldn't do anything useful. Now, I don't think he is purposefully saying this to Feyre. When we tell our kids about this, I want them to know I tried to save their mom. No, because in this moment, he may know that the mating bond exists, but he is actively trying to let her go because he knows that she's with Tamlin and he's really wanting to respect that. However, what pointed language about his future children and wanting to be on the right side of history. There's so much more weight behind these words, and he's covering it up like, yeah, I wanted to be the good guy, since he can't say, because I love you so much and needed to do something to save you in that moment. I love you, I love you, I love you.
Oh.
And then he says, quote, I didn't want you to fight alone or die alone. The exact words that Feyre said to Tamlin when she explained why she stayed with the Blue Fairy all those months ago. Which, yes, she right here makes the comparison of knowing she didn't want to die alone. And the reader, especially us here now on a reread, can fill in the blanks that he didn't help her like Rhys did, even having that knowledge prior to. This right here illustrates for us how similar Rhys and Feyre are, how they understand one another without any effort, how he's there for her and knows what she needs because they are equals. They are mates. Why are we not with them together yet?
So soon. Right after this, she says, thank you to him. And it's the first time she said those words. She has yet to give him a smile and will be a while before she does, but she is absolutely starting to thaw that hatred that was so prominent under the mountain.
She wants to hate Rhys, but she knows that she can't anymore, not after what he's done for her. Then Rhys explains that he doesn't like to be vulnerable because everything he loves had a tendency of being taken from him. Obviously, he's speaking of his mother and sister, but Feyre, he is talking about Feyre here too. She is about to be taken from him. And he says in chapter 54, yep, we're going back to it. So I promised myself that the next time I saw you, I'd free you of the bargain because I was selfish and knew that if I let go right then, he'd lock you up and I never get to see you again. First of all, Rhys really does know Tamlin very well, unfortunately. So in this moment, yeah, he is being vulnerable with her about how he loves his wings and the flying because he's opening up and I'll say trying to create a bridge of trust with her.
And again, this is just highlighting how similar these two are. Remember Feyre's adversity to vulnerability until she literally went on the polar opposite side and declared her love for Tamlin in front of everyone under the mountain. And we all know how that went. Vulnerability is not something that comes naturally to either of these two, but they do start to, I don't even say give hints, they do start to open up that pathway here. Feyre starts to describe how it feels to be immortal upon Rhys's question. Everything in her body is different, but her heart remains the same. She wonders if her heart had changed, though, if she'd be able to live with herself and everything she did with killing those two fairies. But again, 3 fairies technically with Andrés, but I'm not keeping score or anything. But she's not sure if she would even want her heart to have changed because then she wouldn't feel the guilt that she's feeling. And would that make her heartless? She doesn't know. This right here is the jumping off point for book 2 and understanding Feyre's trauma and sadness and grief. I also want to point out that she, in this 3-minute conversation, has already been 10 times more open and vulnerable with Rhysand than she has been in Tamlin, who didn't even notice until after hours had gone by that she was even troubled.
And Rhys even asks her, just out of genuine curiosity, like, what's it like to be Fae? I don't know if anybody else asks her that question, at least not on the page. Feyre being human has been made fun of by Fae throughout this book, and even Rhys throws shade at her for being a human. But ultimately, he appreciates her humanness, her humanity in a way that no one else will be able to, as he encourages her to be grateful for her human heart and embrace that about herself, even if she is now high Fae. He's saying, it's a good thing that you're still human in that way. That's a good thing. And he's really taking this concept that all these high fae really look down on humans, and he's elevating it and telling her to appreciate that. And that's really special about her.
And now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, Rhys bows at the waist, readying to leave, when his eyes lock onto Feyre and they go wide with pure shock. We will learn in, yes, you guessed it, chapter 54, we're there again, that while he knew the mating bond was there when she was human, when they turned her high fae, this locked it into place permanently. That's a very important word there, permanently. Quote, then it hit me so strong that I panicked. I knew if I'd stayed a second longer, I'd damn the consequences and take you with me. Right after his eyes go wide with shock, he stumbles backward and disappears and lands right in the night court in front of Moore. Quote, I was so frantic, so unhinged that I told her everything. I hadn't seen her in 50 years, and my first words to her were, she's my mate.
Gosh, he'll have a tough 3 months ahead, but we'll get to that next episode.
My heart breaks seeing the fan art of this moment where he's like in Moore's arms and just crying out, she's my mate, she's my mate. Because the people who he's missed more than anything, who he fought for, who he killed for, who he was even Amarantha's whore for 50 years, he finally sees them again, but only to realize that his home, his true happiness, is in love with another. Remember the line, quote, everything I love gets taken from me. He's already fallen in love with Feyre. He did so when she flipped him off after the Midgard worm, because naturally that's when I'd fall in love with someone too. And here he is walking away from her. She is indeed, in a way, taken away from him, taken back to the Spring Court, taken to share a bed with another and a life with another. Soon, Rhysand, you'll have your moment soon, my guy.
All right, let's bring this book home, literally, as Feyre brings Tamlin home. And yes, that's actually very intentional wording, because that's exactly what Feyre says. Quote, I'd made it. I brought us both home. Under the Mountain shifted their roles, and Tamlin doesn't even know it yet. I don't know if he ever knows it, actually. Oh, God. He's not her protector anymore. She realizes that she did this, not him.
Yeah, girl.
And now there's this subconscious wedge in their relationship as Tamlin now embraces his powerful protector role. But hey, guess what, Timmy Tam? Too little, too late.
Yep.
Now, as we wrap up our coverage of A Court of Thorns and Roses, I want to go back to the Beauty and the Beast comparison here. Yes, this was a Beauty and the Beast retelling until Feyre went under the mountain, and then SJM twisted this fairy tale into something that feels new and exciting, making us readers truly lean in and get hooked. Feyre is the would-be damsel in distress, the princess who needs saving, but throughout this book, she has proved time and time again that she is resilient and not helpless. She's a fighter since page 1. Which brings us to how Under the Mountain part of the story really reflects another story, the Ballad of Tamlin. The short version of the story is that a cursed fairy knight, Tamlin, literally that's his name, Tam space Lin, so it's 2 words there, asks a human girl to help save his life from a fairy queen who is presumably going to kill him for the sacrificial tithe the fairy folk must pay to this queen every 7 years. Interesting, 7, huh?
7 by 7, you mean?
So this human girl has to successfully hold on to Tamlin and not let go. Again, like I'm giving you a really short version here. There's a lot more nuance to it, but it's harder to hold on to him than it sounds because the fairy queen turns Tamlin into a variety of creatures to make it harder for the human to hold on. However, the human girl succeeds and ends up freeing Tamlin, causing the fairy queen to be angry with her for stealing her most beautiful knight. And now the two are free to raise their family together. I don't think I really need to go through all the details of the similarities to our own story here. Feyre is, of course, the human girl who has to free ACOTAR's Tamlin, and when she succeeds, they are free to live their happily ever after. In both Beauty and the Beast and the Ballad of Tamlin, we get a happily ever after. So, of course, we're expecting the same cadence here, because that's what our brains have literally been trained to think for our whole lives. That's how the story is laid out. That's how these stories go. So that's where that captivation and brilliance of book 2 comes in, as it turns this notion on its head from the get-go, like literally like the first line of the book. And then you look back and realize all of those seeds were planted here in book 1.
Can you tell we're excited to get to book 2, everybody?
We're not even like doing a bonus episode like next week. No. We're just skipping right on into it.
We've waited. We're ready.
Now, while we have already highlighted so many key foreshadowing moments, let's turn our full attention onto foreshadowing for the rest of the series.
When Rhys is telling Feyre parts of his master plan in her cell, he says about Tamlin, quote, "Oh, you should have been born with my abilities, if only to have felt the rage that seeped from him." To which Feyre thinks, I don't want to think much about his abilities. She will have these exact abilities starting tomorrow. But Amarantha mentions how Feyre will be able to easily move on after the murders and after she murders Tamlin. And then she says, quote, "Jurian's human lover did. Hello, Miriam mention. It's good to see ya. I can't wait to have several sipping tea with the Suriels about you because I still don't feel like I understand your character.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about that whole thing. The adder disappears, and wouldn't you know, Durian's eye and bone seem to be missing too. We will learn soon that the adder grabbed these body bits to take back to Highburn, which will resurrect Durian and make him a player in the rest of the series.
I hated body bits. I hated that so much. Tamlin looks at Feyre's tattoo and says, quote, "We'll find a way out of this." He will go to great lengths to help get her out of this bargain, or at least attempt to. He's seeking answers from Helian's vast knowledge in the day court. Of course, though, he sends Lucian. It's not Tamlin. It is Lucian, because on brand. And then naturally going to Highburn, because really, what other option did he have?
Oh, Tamlin, we're going to have so much to say to you.
Oh, he's going to... What's worse than we need to come up with something worse than an L, or even multiple L's.
A double L.
We need something even worse than a double L. When emerging from the cave, they walk out into green hills of the Spring Court, and Feyre calls them, quote, "our lands." Now, while I don't think she's meaning this in a way of possession, as a being high lady, for instance, possession, she will come to learn that there is no way of these truly being her lands, or at least their lands together. But a certain Nightland, that will be one to call her own. It is now time for Sipping Tea with the Suriel, where every episode Lexi is going to sit down with the Suriel for some tea time and walk us through a world-building topic to help us better understand the world and the people in it.
Our final Suriel tea time topic today is in honor of the 7 High Lords that bring Feyre back to life and give her a grain of their power in the process. Way back in episode 3, we covered the 7 courts, and I mentioned each court's High Lord, but today we're going to build on what we learned about the courts and focus our discussion on each of the High Lords and their unique powers. So we'll all be on even footing as we head into ACOMAF, where this information will become key to Feyre's new life as a High Fae. Let's start with a general explanation of the High Lord's powers. I'm going to do my best here because there's some vagueness in the books here. The High Lord position is not actually passed down to the firstborn when a High Lord dies, but rather it is granted to the strongest son. If you are a High Lord's son and granted these unique High Lord-esque powers, there's no hiding them. Everybody will know. You can't hide this power. We also know that there is a beast inside every High Lord. So while they all cannot shapeshift like Tamlin, only High Lords can transform into their inner beast. High Lords don't just have power, they are power. They are especially powerful High Fae with things like the ability to winnow, which not all High Fae are powerful enough to do. They can also glamour and heal, but not to the same extent that Thesean can, among many, many, many other magical powers. Together, the 7 High Lords can resurrect the newly dead, as they demonstrate with Feyre, who they make into a High Fae, and Rhys after he sacrifices himself with the Cauldron. Each of these High Lords' individual powers are not necessarily unique and rare only for the High Lord. For instance, other powerful Fae families in the Autumn Court have Baron's fire power, and some High Lords are more powerful than others. And like I mentioned, they can heal, but then Thesean can extra heal, so to speak. These High Lords' powers are far more than their ability to wield elements or read minds. So keep in mind the powers I will associate with each of them are simply a unique power this High Lord possesses, which is how Feyre receives each of their unique gifts when they make her into Fae. Like usual, when we discuss the courts, we're going to start in Southern Prythian and work our way up north. So let's kick it off with the High Lord of the Spring Court is obviously Tamlin. I'm going to keep this really brief because we're very familiar with Tamlin and his powers by now. Tamlin's power is, of course, shapeshifting. I'm going to be honest, this is one of the cooler and stronger High Lord powers among the 7. We have to remember that Tamlin is considered a very powerful High Lord. Certainly not as powerful as Rhysand, but more powerful than his father, for instance, had been. Tamlin can shapeshift into any creature and seemingly any person, as Feyre will demonstrate with his power. And of course, he can shapeshift others too, like Andros and all of his other sentinels with wolves. Next up, we have one of my personal favorite High Lords, Tarquin of the Summer Court. He's the youngest High Lord at 80 years old when our story takes place. He is one of 3 High Lords who came into this leadership position while under the mountain after Amarantha killed Nostris, the former High Lord of the Summer Court, when he tried to rebel. She unfortunately also had his family killed, leaving his cousin Tarquin as the new High Lord of the Summer Court when he was only 40 years old. Tarquin had previously been a prince in another city. His surviving cousins that we know of include Varian and his older sister Cressida, the prince and princess of Adriata, which is the capital of the Summer Court and one of the 4 main cities. Tarquin spends the last month of winter and the first spring months here in Adriata because of how extra nice it is, right? Nicole's right there with you, Tarquin.
Yeah.
In appearance, Tarquin has rich brown skin, seafoam white hair, and turquoise eyes. He often wears blue-colored clothing with gold accents. He wears a crown of sapphire and white gold fashioned like cresting waves. It's just how lovely. He's also a dreamer who envisions social equality between the high fae and lesser fairies. He is kind, compassionate, and thoughtful. Feyre believes he would be easy to love, and I wholeheartedly agree. He is not trained to be a High Lord. It was never on his radar, which also I have some questions about that with the power being transferred to him, but he wasn't really next in line. I don't know. I'm going to breeze over that for right now. He is not corrupted by court scheming and politics like most of the other High Lords. He has an open heart and is a really good judge of character. Tarquin's power is water manipulation, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to call these elemental powers bending because that's what it is, and it sounds way cooler. So we're bringing some Avatar in here, and I'm doing it on purpose. Tarquin is a waterbender, and dang, he is dangerous on the battlefield with his abilities to drown his victims using that waterbending powers. Then we have the High Lord of the Autumn Court, Baron Vansera, who is the oldest and meanest of the 7 High Lords. We don't know exactly how old he is, but we know Baron was an adult before the war 500 years ago. So he's extra old, right? He is married to the Lady of the Autumn Court, and they had 6 sons together, though he is also outwardly the father to a 7th son, Lucian. Except Lucian's father is actually Helion, and since learning of the affair, Baron has been abusive to his wife to the point where she's now a shell of who she once was. It's so sad. We know the name of his eldest son, Eris, but we don't know the name of his other sons, except of course Lucian. He has 3 other surviving sons and 2 that were killed by Lucian and Tamlin. The Vansera family lives at the Forest House, which, by the way, the fan art for the Forest House is absolutely incredible. I love the Autumn Court, except for, the mean people there. To give you an idea of how terrible of a person Baron is, he had Lucian's love murdered in front of Lucian because she was a lesser fairy and not worthy of him. That's why. That is why he literally had her murdered and made Lucian watch. And separately, he is known for paying his farmers very, very poorly, making them desperate for any favors or extra handouts. So he's a shitty High Lord, let's just call it. Baron is tall with a slender face and brown hair, and then his power is firebending. That's fitting, right? And remember that the Lady of the Autumn Court also has this magical ability. Because of her powerful lineage, it was considered a good marriage alliance. Firebending is passed down now to Lucian, so I guess Lucian has firebending qualities as well, not from Baron, but from the Lady of the Autumn Court. So if you ask me, one of the reasons he rules with such hatred and fear is to make up for his weaker and more common powers. But that's just my personal opinion. Last but not least, for the High Lords of seasonal courts, we have Callias of the Winter Court. The High Lord position shifted to him also while under the mountain after the former High Lord of the Winter Court and his family were killed by Amarantha 40 years ago when they tried to rebel. Again, he's one of these 3 who became High Lord under the mountain, like Tarquin and the Day Court. He resides in the mountain home within the Winter Court with his mate Vivian, who is the Lady of the Winter Court. They're expecting a baby by the end of the series, so yay, good for them. I'm so happy for them. Callias has skin so pale he looks frozen and white hair. Even his crushing blue eyes seem like chips from a glacier. He wears clothes of white and gray with furs and has a crown of shimmering ice. His power, I'm going to shock you here, is ice bending. Why is that not the same as Tarquin's water bending? I'm not sure, but they are distinctly different powers belonging to different courts. Something with the temperatures, I don't know. Moving on, the Dawn Court's High Lord is Thesan. He glows the brightest among all the High Lords. He's slender with brown skin and hair kissed with gold as if sunrise had permanently gilded them. How lovely. Oh my goodness. I just love all these descriptions of them and how they just fit so perfect within each of their courts. His loveliest feature, however, are his eyes, which are upswept and rich brown. His lava is the captain of his guard and commander of the Dawn Court's Peregrine Aerial Legion. They're like the feathered version of Illyrians. If you're watching on YouTube, you just saw me flapping there. Thesan's unique power is his healing abilities, like I mentioned earlier. We don't know if he's only able to provide healing by giving his blood, as Feyre demonstrates, or if he has other means of using his healing powers, but all we know is he has healing powers, and that is really, really going to be good for Rhysand. Next, we have Helion, High Lord of the Day Court. He is the third High Lord who became High Lord while under the mountain after the previous one and his family were killed for trying to rebel with the Summer and Winter Courts. Another title he is known as is Spell Cleaver. Helion's unique power is curse breaking, where he can unweave spells and break through shields. He can also generate light. Helion is described as a sun personified, especially as he shimmers and glows from within. He has dark brown skin and onyx hair. He also has a gleaming crown of golden spikes to represent the sun, of course. While all our High Lords are in good shape, Helion is like extra muscular. Like, he goes to the gym, bro. We don't know his exact age, but we can guess that he was at least a young adult around the war 500 years ago, even though he didn't become High Lord of the Day Court until 40 years ago. Centuries ago, he had an affair with the Lady of the Autumn Court, and Lucian is actually his biological son, but neither of them are aware of this. Yet? Maybe?
Hopefully.
I really want them to find out. Helion is a jolly fellow. He's playful, he's unashamedly sexual and bi, and charismatic and compassionate. However, don't piss him off because he is not afraid to be cold and calculating when he feels he has to be. He is one of the few High Lords that we know more about his beast form. Helion's beast form is a creature of gold feathers, shredding claws, and feathered wings. I just love how it's described as the opposite of Rhys, crafted of light and sunbeam compared to Rhys's dark night. Last thing here on Helion, for at least today's Suriel segment, he owns the only herd of Pegasuses, and especially loves his stallion Melian, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, who is a handsome black Pegasus. And then, of course, we have the High Lord of the Night Court, Rhysand. We will dive way more into him as we continue this series. So like Tamlin, I'm going to keep this pretty short. He is the most powerful High Lord in history and is uniquely half Fae, half Illyrian, so he can summon his Illyrian wings when he wishes, though he likes to keep those hush-hush. Keep in mind that these wings are different than his High Lord beast form, like I was mentioning earlier, even though that also has membrane wings too, but it's like an actual beast, not a humanoid like he is as an Illyrian. Rhys has a long list of powers, so let's go through just a few of them. He can summon darkness, manipulating and controlling shadows and darkness. Hello, Shadow Daddy. He is also a Damati, aka a mind reader and mind controller. He can change your memories or even shatter your mind, as we have seen. He can also mist people, which, as Nicole says, is like Bath and Body Works. It's exactly what it sounds like. He kills with just a thought and turns his enemies into mist.
Woo! I'm so excited. Oh my goodness. Let us wrap up this episode with our favorite moments. I love the moment when on her way to her final trial, the fairies touch their fingers to their lips and then extend their hands out to Fae-vorite, a gesture of the fallen and honored dead. This, I can't think of anything else except for like, do, 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 do. like full on Hunger Games moment, even though they are extending it out instead of extending it up. Also, quote, trust no one, Alice had told me, but I trusted Tamlin. And more than that, I trusted myself. Oh, I could weep with pride for our girl and her own self-assurance that is coming out in a dark hour of her life. I love also that during this utter shit show, Jurian's eyes going wild in the ring. And it would be crazy to watch this unfold from Amarantha's ring. Like how Jurian is even semi-normal. I don't even know if I can call him normal.
Oh, I'm going to have a lot of curiosity about how he is like so normal after all of this.
Like 500 years attached to this woman. Woof. We're also getting to see Lucian take off the mask first with tears in his eyes. Yes, of course, he's absolutely crying because of everything that just happened, but he's also crying of the freedom that he's been given. It's so beautiful.
And like, he can't believe that it's happened. Remember, back at the beginning of this book, he was on to plan B. He was like, no, like, we got to screw this plan. It's not going to work. We got to focus on plan B. But I also like to think, of course, that he's crying because of Feyre's death and seeing all of this play out. They have become good friends and they've been there for each other in a way that nobody else has been. And he's really sad that she's died.
I love that when Rhysand calls upon Fae-vorite and tugs that pole in her middle, she knows it's him who's tugging her long before she ever looks upon his face. And then, of course, in that same scene, quote, be glad of your human heart, Fae-vorite. Pity those who don't feel anything at all. This is so reminiscent of, quote, don't pity the dead, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love. Oh, I love lines like this. It's so beautiful.
And lastly, I just love the domesticity of returning to the spring court. Alice with her boys, and the best part is Lucian calling them to dinner. Like, hey, yo, the dining room is fixed, everybody. Let's eat.
Freaking dining room coming into play again. I swear to God, it haunts me. It haunts me forever.
So randomly become one of the running jokes of this. Which, friends, that is such a great time to wrap up this book. Oh my gosh, we did it. We are 1 out of 5 books done.
You should have seen the eyes that just got so wide. I was like, oh God.
I'll say 4.5.
Yeah,
We're only going to do 2 episodes for Frost and Starlight.
Yeah, because there's not a whole lot. I can't wait to change out my book as my background to Mist and Fury. I'm so excited.
First one of our ACOTAR journey is in the books. In the books, get it? We are wasting no time and diving right into A Court of Mist and Fury next Monday, April 22nd. We're going to hit the ground running, starting with chapters 1 through 6.
Thank you, as always, to our executive producer, Hayden, aka our sanity manager. We love ya.
And if you are just loving all of this ACOTAR content and want more community, please be sure to join the Patreon party. The link is in our show notes. And hey, guess what else is in the show notes if you're looking? Subscribe to our monthly newsletter. It is free, and you get so much extra Fantasy Fangirls content once a month at the end of every month. And speaking of extra content, if you're not following us on Instagram and TikTok, what are you doing? Give us a follow at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
Do not forget also to rate and review the show. It takes 2 seconds to hit that 5-star button on whatever podcasting platform you are listening on. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, first of all, thank you for watching us. And secondly, you can hit the like button for this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. And last but most importantly, please share with your fellow ACOTAR friends. If you and your friends like Lexi couldn't handle the 3 trials and you don't want to listen to that part of the audiobook, instead you want to listen to people talk about that part of the audiobook, send this episode to them. It is one of the most helpful ways that this show has grown. And thank you to everyone who screams about it from the rooftops. There's many of you, and we are so, so grateful. Are you ready to go to ACOMAF, Lexi?
I'm so ready. Let's do this.
On to ACOMAF!
We love you. We will see you next week.
Bye! I bumped into it.
Off to a good start here.
We're good at it. Chapter 44. Chapter 40.
I don't know what this was because the next one is also 45.
I think I missed one.
But then the next one's also chapter 46. Let me pull this up.
Dude, I'm so lost. This is definitely different chapters. What the fuck did I do? Are there 47 chapters? What?
No, it's definitely 46.
Why am I missing
Okay, wait, we got to go back up to chapter 42, chapter 43.
Good job, Nicole. All right, let's try this. But there's a succinct. There's a thump.
I thought it was a succulent thump.
Oh, this is going to be a fun episode. Actually, no, it's not. We're talking about death. Jesus Christ, outside. What did I write here?
Bees, real bad, Breeze. Bees bad.
Bees?
Fate brought Feyre.
Why do I write words like abide? When did I get that?
I don't know. Nicole, are you crying?
No, I'm trying to get a piece of dead skin off my lips.